Sawadee Krab. Thank you so much, David, for being here with us. I'm really excited about what you have to share with us. So let's get right into it. David, you got it. There's your screen is shared.
Okay, so are you looking at my slide now?
I am. Yep.
All
I
right.
see the little house.
Okay, well, uh, Jonathan, so let me give a bit of introduction to this. Um, in the days when this all was made, in the days when uh, we had a lot of students live at AUA, and I found, it's a mixed bag of people who would come to us. We had students from all walks of life. We had students who uh, knew about ALG and
Right.
some who didn't.
Yeah.
And so what I wanted to do was make sure that when people came to ALG, what they found was not a surprise. We
Okay.
had to do a lot of work to make sure that when people came in, they knew what we were doing. So this was basically a kind of a non-academic, if you will, introduction to ALG and the concepts that underlie what it is we do.
Okay.
And I think this might be good for us because now that we're doing this online, I could probably uh, create an online version of this or something.
Yeah. I
But
think that's a very good idea.
yeah, yeah. Anyway, so thanks for your interest, and I hope this is helpful. Along the way, are we going to be having questions, or people going to be able to ask questions?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, because my preference is that this is interactive, and you
It will
just
be.
need to
Yeah.
interrupt or whatever, because just so everyone else knows, I'm looking at the slide only. That's what I see. All right.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'll
So
let you know
cool.
where the questions are, and then we'll.
All right. And if something happens on your end, uh, you know, call me on the phone or something.
Okay. All right, we'll do.
Yeah, cool. All right. So uh, this slide is my favorite.
Okay. All right.
When I moved to Thailand, I rented a house. It had virtually no kitchen. The kitchen was literally a meter and a half wide, little room tacked on at the back of the house that was a meter and a half wide and about 2.5 meters long.
Okay.
And you could barely get two people in it without any furniture at all. And there was no countertop, there was no sink, there was nothing in that space, and they called it
Okay.
a kitchen. So I liked the house, but I told the owner, if you build an addition onto the back, we had room for that.
Hmm.
Build me a room on the back that would be a larger kitchen and a storage room or something, a back bedroom, something like that. That would be perfect. I'll rent the house. So they did. And I can remember the cost of that first addition. And I remember the workers who came and they put it up quite quickly.
Yeah.
And it looked great for about 6 months.
Right.
And if any of you have built in around the Bangkok area or know people who have, Bangkok is a swampland in effect. It's a delta, and anything you build will sink.
Uh,
If it doesn't sink, it's because they've got the foundation that goes down to the bedrock about 20 meters deep.
whoa.
And they didn't do that with this addition, but they did with the house. So the house was sitting on that bedrock, but the addition was not. And within 6 months, it started to literally fall off the house. Yeah, after about a year and a half, I told the landlord, this room's not usable. It's sloping down, it's sinking into the ground. We got to fix it. So they invested another bit of money, a little bit more than the initial investment, to tear that down and rebuild it. And this time, in about 3.5 years, it was unusable again. So we built it twice now.
Hmm.
And I moved out of the house. I told the owner, I said, I don't think this room's going to work. And about the time I was moving out, the neighbor in my backyard behind me started doing an addition. And about that time, this owner of my house said, all right, we're going to just tear it down and make it a slab patio. The neighbors put about half of the money our landlord spent on those two additions they did on my house. The neighbors spent about half that amount building a foundation down to the bedrock.
Okay.
And my owner, she's sitting there saying, oh, that's just too expensive. It's too much money. And I got to doing the math, and she'd spent probably 2.5 times more
Yeah.
than my neighbors behind me
And worse
to build
results.
basically the same thing.
Yeah.
But for her way of thinking, it was too expensive.
Short-term thinking.
10 years later, the neighbors have a room that can still be used, and the house I was renting doesn't.
Exactly.
And for me, that literally like demonstrates what we see in language, second language acquisition. If you want to acquire a language, you get something that's comparable to a native language, depending on how far you take it. And the only way to do that is through a proper foundation. If you don't have a proper foundation, whatever you build on top is going to sink.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people sink. What I mean by that is it's quickly unusable.
Right.
And we see that over and over and over again. And people still, with the short-term view, say, no, building that foundation just takes too long. And
Right.
so in this conversation of this presentation, that's one of the key emphasis that I put into this is this idea that building a proper foundation for a structure, it takes too long. For me, it's the only way to build a structure.
Right.
Now, if you say, all I want to do is speak 10 sentences, I want to impress a few people at parties,
Yeah.
and then go back to using English. So if you're here in Thailand, for example, you want to learn Thai that way, or if it's another language, just pardon me, I'll use Thai as the example.
Right. Sure.
If you just say that's what I want, well, an ALG type program isn't the way to get that. It's just quite frankly.
Yeah.
But memorizing 10 sentences will do you much better, and it won't take that long. But that's hardly comparable to using a language in any form. And to be honest, I don't have any problem with someone who wants to memorize a few phrases.
Right.
But that's just not what we're about. Okay. The key
We're
to
about
this
learning the language, right?
we're about acquiring it. Yeah. If you want to learn
exactly.
the language.
Actually acquiring the language. Right.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to get into that conversation, but there is a difference between learning a language and acquiring it, and it's an interesting difference.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're thinking about acquiring a language, the only place to start is with the foundation.
Right.
If you start anywhere else, you're creating obstacles to the natural development of that language. And Krashen said, understanding happenings, this is not a quote, is the only way to build a real foundation for any language. Understandable or comprehensible input is the whole point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what I have in this simple diagram is very simply that. The foundation's all the gray stuff. We
Mm-hmm.
want to discount it like it's not the important stuff. For me, that's everything.
Right.
It doesn't matter if you want to build a 1-story hut or if you want to build a 50-story skyscraper. For me, right, the foundation is the place you've got to start.
Yeah.
And a language is much more like a 50-story building than it is like a small little hut. Hard to live in a hut after time. You want to add on to it, and there's just nothing there that really works. Okay. In the time I spent years ago when I had my English school, I would have Thai parents come in, and the first thing that would bring them in, if they hadn't already met us when they registered their kids, They wanted to know, why do my kids not want to watch TV on Saturday morning, but they want to come learn English at your school? What are you guys doing? And I would get all smug and say, well, we're just playing. We're just playing games. And the parents would get big-eyed and they go, what? You're just playing games? What is that? I'm paying you to play games with my kid. They need to be studying. Why don't they have any homework? And blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And I would often just ask them outright, how long did you study English? Oh, I don't know. Well, what kind of a degree do you have? And they'd tell me, oh, I have a bachelor's degree and whatever. And I said, all right, so you studied English to begin with when you were how old? Some of them were 12 years old. Some were, some
Right.
older, some younger.
Sure.
And they would say something like, well, that was what I did, but I don't really want to speak to you in English. I said, you've studied English for maybe 10 years in school, and I can't sit here and have a simple conversation in English with you.
Right.
And now you want to put your kid through the same kind of program. And I'm just telling you, it's not going to work. You're going to learn what you learn. You're going to test. It's going to pass, and you're going to forget it. And I would give them this sort of an example. And it was really, I think, a powerful example. I said, look, if you have two kids and one of them comes and spends every summer at my house when they're out free from school 2 months a year, the other kid goes to a school like you did or some school teaching English for the same amount of time, who do you think's going to come away after 5 years of this, right? Or 10 years of this, or however long it needs to be? Who's going to come away with English that you can take to England and use? Right. And they always answer, well, the kid who comes and spends time at your house. Well, you know what, at my house, I don't make it a practice of teaching English. We don't talk about English at my house. We just use it.
Mm-hmm.
And that foundation of understandable experience in life, that is the key. Mm-hmm. That's what we give them. And so, normally with that, enough was said, they'd register and keep their kids in the program.
Yeah.
And then we'd have the second big challenge for parents down the road. But, if we compare this, what do adults do and what do children do in acquiring a language? It's just huge. So all over the world, children, everyone talks about how fast kids learn language, how fast they pick it up,
right?
How fast they acquire language. And let's look at how kids do that, right? They come in, they focus on life and what's happening around them. Speaking doesn't begin right away. They're quiet for the first period of time. They always become fluent. It's just like expected. They understand everything in that language after a short time.
Okay.
Short time being what, a year, 2 years? Mm-hmm. I come to the adult and I say, it's going to take you a couple years of living life, understandable experience. What? That's a long time. And they just have said that it's a short time if it's a kid. So we've got this issue. We've got this issue around time,
right?
That really drives us in a way we're not even present to, I think. And then we come up with examples of reasons why adults can't do what kids do. Well, we don't even try to begin with. But what we do as adults is make excuses for why we can't do what kids do. Mm-hmm. We don't give it a year or two because that's a long time. But for a kid, it's all right. It's very quick, right? We don't give it the time,
right? And
we come up with excuses like, well, adults have lost their ability to do this, and that's people think that all around the world, and it's
total BS.
If you think about it from any sense of logic, it's a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, for sure.
Adults, what we have seen is adults have some abilities kids don't have, right? But they haven't lost anything, and so in our English program we had both kids and adults studying side by side, not in the same program exactly. The kids program was for kids and the adult program was for adults.
Right.
But given the same amount of time, adults actually did better in some ways than kids.
Mm-hmm.
But they weren't as childlike. And the more childlike the adults were, the better they did.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say childlike, that's a packed phrase, so that means something. But if we'll do what children do,
Mm-hmm.
we have the same ability to gain a language in the same way children do it. And we can avoid all the results adults have everywhere, where we try to speak from the start, and speaking is always labored and difficult, and uh, mistakes. That's going to happen for everyone. So
Right.
I don't throw that in the list of things that don't work or work. It's just everyone makes mistakes using a language, and it goes with it. But adults don't spend time on the foundation, and then
Mm-hmm.
complain when well, we've got one floor now, let's go to the second floor, and it looks the same as the first floor because the first floor is just sinking.
Right.
We go through 10 levels of an English program and you're kind of back at level one. And if you actually look at the people who become fluent, almost everyone discounts all the time they spend with friends, all the time they spend in life experience
Right.
in that language. And it's a real shame, because I think it's not difficult when you start to calculate that amount of time in. It's not difficult to realize that study produces very, very little for most people. Not everyone, but for most of us, study doesn't help us at all. Life experience, you get a lot out of that. I
Right.
studied Spanish for 6 months, and then I spent 2 weeks in Mexico. Guess what I remember now?
Right. Exactly.
Those 2 weeks in Mexico were powerful, and it wasn't a language program.
Right.
But I still have memories from that. The memories from the Spanish classes, it's like getting thrown out of the class is what I remember most of all, because I didn't want to be there anyway. So, maybe if I had have wanted to have been there, different experience and so on. I can remember really wanting to learn Greek and working at it. And I still remember very little of that at all. Never been to Greece either, so I don't know.
So,
Um,
David, would you break down kind of clearly the difference between what children do and what adults do?
so children come at this thing called life. That's a good question too. Thanks. Because when children just naturally come into a situation that they're unsure about, they're open-eyed, open-eared, closed mouth, and just soaking in everything there is to soak up. You watch a kid in a new situation, they all do the same thing. Right? And we're born into life, and that's what we do. We open our eyes and our ears, and if you eliminate the first year of our development for physiological and mental development, by the time we're 1 years old to 2 years old, we're just taking in life. We're soaking up life experience and trying to understand it. That trying to understand, what is that like? It's just guessing about what the world is about. What is this about? And playing with it. That play and guessing is a very, very key thing, in my opinion, for learning anything.
Mm-hmm.
If we can get into this mode of guessing about it and playing with it, is the best learning environment that there is. Now, adults, on the other hand, attack this idea. Whatever it is they're going to learn, they attack it with this passion and try to dissect it into its parts and memorize them all and put it back together. And it's very intentional, and it's
Right.
a lot of hard work. And there's a few people good at it, and
Right.
the rest of us are not. And we all have our areas where we can do well in that, right? I have areas where I can dissect a subject and take it apart, and those are things I'm well versed in. Language learning just wasn't one of them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So so how adults come at something like that is completely different. Kids come at life and don't know that there's language there to be gained. They just pick it up and they start playing with it and they make guesses about it. Playing with it for a kid also involves this concept of speaking. So maybe later on in the slides we can talk about this idea of speaking and what it means, because that's another packed phrase.
Yeah.
When I say speaking begins early or speaking begins late, I'm not saying that kids don't use their mouth to play around with the language. But the way that adults look at speaking, the way kids look at playing around with it is quite different, I think. Internally, what's going on mentally is different.
Okay.
So there's a really distinct thing there that we got to get a hold of. When adults speak, they're going through this process of pre-thinking. Oftentimes, I've got to think, how does this word sound? How do we say it? Is this the right pronunciation? How is it used? And they're going through all this before they put something out there. And that's, I think, completely unnatural.
Yes.
What is natural is what kids do. They'll play around with it. You can watch them do that. Even young kids in a new language environment will play around with the language in a fun way, and they'll make themselves laugh at it. But it's really tough to get them to do well. I don't think the capacity to do the adult thing isn't there yet.
Right.
So all they have left is guessing and playing with it.
Got it.
Yeah. Okay. Should we move on?
Okay, sure.
Good. So coming back briefly to this matter of time, I said that first slide with the house was my favorite. This is my least favorite.
Oh.
When we think about time, we don't compare apples and apples. If I say to you, it's going to take you 2 years to acquire this language or 3 years to acquire the language, well, I don't have that much time. Well, how much time do you have? And then let's be realistic, right?
Right.
If time is measured in hours, which is what we do at ALG, we measure time in hours. All right.
Yeah.
800 hours in an adult setting in ALG type classes, where in a class, what we're trying to do in a classroom is basically not copy, not replicate, but provide understandable experience hour by hour. That's what we strive to do.
Okay.
So each hour you should be coming away with a memorable experience or several. Okay.
Mm.
And so doing that takes a certain kind of, it's a lot of technique and skill and all kinds of things. But if we compare that to a child in their life, whatever they get in their first 22 months, that's a comparable age point.
Okay.
So in ALG, we'll say 800 hours is roughly the same place as 22 months is for a child.
Mm.
Now, they say, well, that's a long time. Well, it's how long it is. All over the world, children start speaking their native language average of 22 months.
Mm.
And if some of us are wondering, is Chinese more difficult than Thai, or English is more difficult than Japanese? No matter where they are, 22 months is the average where kids start speaking their native language.
Right.
Now, what do I mean by that?
Mm-hmm.
Speaking
Little bit.
is improvising their first sentences.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So and some kids are faster, and parents tend to be proud of those kids, and some kids are slower, and parents tend to worry about them and take them to the doctor, and the doctor goes and checks their ears and the physical response to certain kinds of input. Not they're doing great. It's a very difficult and comprehensive test they give the kid. It takes about 3 minutes, and the doctor says, "Oh, they're fine."
Mm-hmm.
And at 3 years old, they start speaking and nonstop kind of thing, and parents realize there's nothing to worry about. So that average of 22 months varies from child to child, obviously, and it doesn't mean anything. There's nothing significant about that.
Mm-hmm.
And with adults, it's the same thing. Well, will I start speaking at 800 hours of your classes? I don't know, but that's about an average. That compares the child at 22 months.
Okay.
And there are a lot of factors, right, that come into that. But if you ask me, is that a long time to get a foundation and start using that language in a verbal way? To me, it doesn't seem like a long time at all. 2 years, that's a very short time. So if you think about 2 years for a child, they're the best learners and the best example we have. If you could do that with the similar results, wouldn't that be awesome, right? And that's what ALG is about, because that is what we produce. Now, does everyone do that? No. A very significant number of adults don't give it enough time. They don't do what children do. They're smarter than kids and smarter than nature, so they're going to add all this stuff that makes sense along the way. But what they don't realize is it actually gets in the way. It's like building the roof and having it all in place before you've got the first and second and third floor built. And then you realize, oh, well, this roof's in the way, but it's there already. So how do you get it out of the way? And it's a problem. But we don't think about language in that way. So it's too late. Yeah.
Okay.
One of the other examples for me that just make a lot of sense is this idea of measuring progress and the naturalness of things like growing a fruit tree, for example. I remember when I was a kid, and I lived in Southern California, and apples are not they're not something that's normally grown in Southern California. But somehow we wound up with an apple tree.
Okay.
That was it came in a pot. It was about 2 years old. It was about a little bit higher than I was. And my dad stuck it in the backyard of our house.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember say, how long will it be before we have apples? And I think it was my uncle who was there. He said, it'll be 7 years. So when the tree is 7 years old, it'll have its first apple. And so I counted, well, it's 2 now, so that'd be 5 more years. And the ground in our house, at our house it was terrible. It was hard enough to grow grass, much less anything else, So, but I counted, and I remember when it was 5 years, we had 2 apples that year. They were little, hard, terrible little things, but they were apples.
Yeah.
It grew its first fruit, and I was amazed. How did my uncle know that? How did he know that it was going to be 7 years before it had apples? And it turns out that's what it takes to grow apples from an apple tree from a seed. That's how long it takes. So I was just amazed by that. But if you think about things like growing fruit trees, it is a predictable thing. If I have a field of corn, it's going to take 2 months and I'll get my first corn out of that. It's how long it takes to grow and produce corn. Just when you think about how long things take in nature,
right.
There's a real consistency to it. And what we found with natural language learning or acquiring a language is the same thing. With a tree, I'm going to be monitoring what? I'm going to be monitoring the soil. I'm going to monitor the amount of light, the amount of water, and the temperature, because that's the environment the tree is in. And those are the things I do to be able to accurately predict what kind of fruit I'm going to have. Right? With language, we can do exactly the same thing.
Okay.
Okay. And we measure the environment, not the student. It's not things like IQ. It's not things like it's really the environment that this person is in. All right. And that environment, very little of it has to do with the student. This is something that I think oftentimes people who are good at language learning don't like about ALGs, because you can't boast. You know, I've lived in Thailand now for 30 plus years, and people from years ago till now, oh, your Thai is great. I always get a little bit offended by that. That's like telling me my English is great. What does that even mean? You know, I mean, why would someone say that? It's ridiculous. And I compliment them on their Thai too. Oh, you have Thai. Your Thai is actually better than mine. And they laugh and don't know really what to do with that. You know, it's like, well, you know, you know, what do you say? It's a real conversation stopper, really. But it's a little bit like I can't boast about my Thai. Why? Because I got it from an environment that was provided by ALG. It had nothing to do with me. I was in that environment. And all I had to do was do what kids do in a new environment, which is open my eyes, open my ears, and guess about what's going on. And that's what I literally did for a year, right? And it ended up being more than 800 hours, which is great use of a year. But if we look at that environment for a child, or for language, sorry, not for a child, but for language learner, we're talking about number of hours in that environment. We're talking about what level of understanding, what's going on, is that person, you know, experiencing. Like, is their understanding at 50% of what's happening, or are they understanding 80% or 90% of what's happening? That understanding factor is a big one. Right? Ceiling is the variable that students actually have some say in more than anything else, right? So with ceiling, are they doing what kids do, or are they doing what adults do?
Okay.
Right. So if you do the adult thing, like grabbing words and memorizing them and thinking about this word and that word, and oh, this sounds like, you know, if I say moo in Thai, I'm thinking, oh, that's the sound a cow makes. You know, if I'm trying to connect up language like that in my head, I'm doing the adult thing. My ceiling's going to be low, which is
you're actually decreasing the results you're going to get, not helping. Exactly. It's counterintuitive.
It is totally counterintuitive. So the curves on the chart, that's represented. The difference of those is solely ceiling. More time, they're still only going to rise to a certain height or certain ceilings. If you look at the blue, red, and green curves, those are different ceilings. And there are some that are lower than that. There are some ceilings people don't get to 60% and never will, because they've capped it by building the house before the foundation, if you will. And then the native language is a bit of in the red arrow, you can see how it says language/culture, because really in this context, it's the same thing. What your background is makes you a better guesser sometimes, and language similarities can transfer. So if I'm learning, this will make a lot of sense. So if I'm learning Thai and I'm from Laos, I'm going to go at a much faster rate than David from Los Angeles coming to Thailand for the first time.
That makes sense.
The ocean student's going to whip past me in about 3 hours. He's going to be at a new level, and I'm still stuck on square one.
Right.
So we find that Chinese students are a little bit faster than American students, for example.
Sure.
What we realize is not so much linguistic similarity, but cultural similarity has a big play in that.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
David, I have a question real quick before we move on. And also, there's kind of an echo. Is there any way for us to deal with that?
Probably. Let me try this. See if that's better.
Okay.
Is that better?
Awesome. Perfect. Okay.
All right.
So, wait, it's still a little bit. But anyway.
All right.
my question is this: you mentioned the ceiling. So let's say is there any way we can deal with that echo? That's killing me.
Is it really?
Yeah,
All right.
I can hear
Give me a
myself.
second.
Like 5 seconds
All
later.
right. Let me try something real quick here. I'm going to put in a headset and see if that doesn't fix it.
Okay.
All right.
In the meantime, my question is this: you talked about the ceiling, and you say some people don't get to that 60% because they've already done a lot of, unnatural stuff in the beginning. And I personally have done unnatural stuff in the beginning too. Like if you know Pimsleur, for a while, all I had was Pimsleur, and I really wanted to spend time learning Thai. So what I did was hours and hours of repeating the Pimsleur lessons, right? And I'm finding that as I speak now, it's I've got quite a bit of a Farang accent. So and so what if you're someone who if you're understanding more than 60%, but it's when you speak, it's still not supernatural. What do those people do? I still want to learn by comprehensible input. I still want to do ALG. I still don't want to look things up in a dictionary. I want to be as kid-like as possible, but I've kind of got like a little bit of a crippled thing going on. What do I do? What's your suggestion for that?
That's a great question, and you're not going to like my answer. So first, is the echo pretty much gone, or is it still there?
It's gone. It's gone. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Perfect. All right, good. If it comes back, let me know. So I don't think you're going to like this answer, right?
Okay.
I don't think there's anything you can do. The best thing that could happen is if you wanted to eliminate that, I don't know how you do it. The things you've learned are like neural shortcuts, and I don't know how you lose them.
Got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it is it is possible. Neuroplasticity is a very it's very real. However, it's not easy. But the thing is, like when I learned Chinese, I learned in a university for a couple semesters. Then I went to China and had a ton of experiences. And now there's a couple pronunciation things that are still like not so perfect, but mostly it feels very natural, and Chinese feels like my second native language. And you see people like that.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you see people like that, and that's why people think the textbook way works, because there are people that learn a little bit with textbook, and then they get a ton of life experience in the language, and then they're near native. But it's not a lot of people, and they still aren't fully native, because they still have some.
So earlier I mentioned Spanish for my own experience, and part of the reason that I learned a lot of Spanish when I went to Mexico and not in my Spanish class was because my Spanish teacher mostly taught about Spanish. She didn't really speak Spanish much, and she didn't teach Spanish much. She taught about Spanish a lot.
Right.
So that had less impact as well. I didn't apply myself to trying to speak it. So that also helped me. Right. I'm guessing that your experience with Thai is more, you were more what you did with Pimsleur was a bit more focused on trying to use the language than what you did with Chinese when you were studying that at university. I'm guessing.
I did. Okay, so actually, when I did Chinese, I started with Pimsleur as well. I did 90 Pimsleur lessons, and with Thai, they only have 30 lessons. However, a big difference is I repeated the Thai lessons over and over because I didn't have anything else that I thought was effective, and I wanted to spend time on it. So, but I did start with
Yeah.
Pimsleur in Chinese.
So that's interesting. I don't know. I think it would be worth looking at the amount of time, looking at the other environmental things you did in both
Yeah.
languages,
Right.
right? Because we would, if I was going to assess your Thai and English, in fact, we've done a Thai assessment already once.
Like
But
in
if
the
we
summer or
did the
something,
same
right?
thing
A
with
long time
Chinese,
ago.
yeah, and we just try to define those 4 areas of your
Yeah.
learning environment, if you will, right?
Here's
We
my
might come
sorry,
up with.
David. I was just going to say here's my take on it is that there is neuroplasticity, there is the ability to overcome it, but it takes, like you're saying, the experience. You have to get that life experience. You have to and start living in the language for a long enough time. So I think because here I'm in America and I'm learning this way, my thinking is actually it's impossible for me to overcome those things until I do what I'm planning on doing with Thai and going to Thailand and being a monk and living in Thai, and having those life experiences for at least several years. But
It's
as
possible.
far as I can tell, that's the only way that it would be possible without me doing something unnatural, right? Like practicing the speaking and things I don't want to do,
So I'm guessing that you would need to do more unnatural work to systematically correct those things.
Yeah,
I
especially if
don't
I'm
think
staying here in
coming
the
here would
States.
be enough.
You
No,
think so?
but even in Thailand, my experience in Thailand with there are a couple of sounds in Thai.
Yeah.
I can distinctly remember learning on purpose in the classroom. All right, and the experience was something where I was in the classroom. The teacher started talking about something that I didn't have the distinction of this sound with that sound, and I felt like, well, I should have this. So I threw out the rules of ALG and said, I'm just going to figure it out. And I manually worked on those, identifying the differences between those sounds. And 30 years later, I still use them erroneously. You know, I don't, and the problem isn't, you'd think living here would make a difference. The problem is, I don't hear them correctly.
I see what you're saying.
And and why I don't hear them correctly is because I've already created the neural shortcut in my head.
Right. Yeah, I got that.
That hears them a different way. So, the easy one, if our listeners or you see this later in Thailand, the Thai word for the white foreigner, but sometimes all foreigners, is Farang.
Yeah.
And the Thai word for Farang, if you were to spell it in English letters, would be spelled Farang.
Right.
So if I just write out Farang to most English-speaking foreigners, they're going to read it, oh, Farang. Now, Farang and Farang are 2 different sounds completely. But once you learn that Farang is Farang, and then whenever you hear the Thai say Farang, you're hearing Farang, and you can't stop it. You can't hear it another way because that's what you hear. It's a little bit like color blindness.
Okay.
But with a different source entirely, so I don't like to compare it that way. But this is something we do. Now for you, it's going to sound a little different, but you're not going to get it. I have a funny story on my own self. When I first, if you know a bit of Thai and you're Thai, you'll get this immediately. The first landlord, the house I rented, not the one with the kitchen story, but the first place I lived is up on Lat Phrao, and the owner, her name, her Thai name was Sotsi, It means like a bright, beautiful color
Mm-hmm.
and a fresh color, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
Sotsi was this just wonderful lady and her husband. His name was Udom. So Udom and Sotsi were just like parents to us when we first moved here, and very gracious people. But I can remember being introduced to her by my friend, and I didn't know how to say Sotsi. I didn't know what that was. I didn't have any meaning connected with it.
Right.
Now the word for fresh is Sot, and the word for animal is Sat. But I put that Sotsi into, oh, how do you say that? And I just spelled it in my head, Sotsee. Oh, Satsi. And I said it back to her the way it would be pronounced if I spelled it, which is
Yes.
what I did. I
Yeah.
spelled it in English so I could remember it. Made sense, right?
Uh-huh.
She looked at me aghast when I said her name. No, just never mind. Just call me Kun, whatever,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, for sure.
And
That's a
and it
big
was
insult.
totally offensive that I had called her, what, I'd say animal color or something. I don't even know if I said C correctly now when
Colorful
I think
animal.
about it. But she was aghast. It was like
Yeah.
she was just, oh my God, that was
Yeah.
terrible. I knew it by her face. I'd said something wrong. I asked my friend. He kind of laughed nervously. He said, "I'll just call her something else."
Yeah.
So he told me what else to call her, and I never knew that until after like halfway through my language study, and it occurred to me what I
You're
had
like,
called her. Oh
oh
my
no.
God!
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
that she was gracious enough to not hold it against me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't see how you could hold it against somebody. It's not like you were intentionally doing that. But
No, it wasn't intentional, but it wasn't something that she or Thai people could be around. If she was with her friends, that would have been completely embarrassing.
mm,
Um, and I think in there's a sensitivity around stuff like that with the Thai that we don't necessarily have in English, I think.
mhm.
But I understand that if you're speaking French and you do it a little bit off, it's not appreciated in the same way.
Mm.
So I think Thai is sort of like the French of Asia.
Okay.
If you can't do it right, don't try. It won't be appreciated.
That means ALG is even more important for Thai, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah, Thai is a perfect language because it's very vital, really, to speak it well. It's a bit dangerous to not be able to do that.
Okay. Well, that's good for me then. That means I'm a talkative person, and the fact that my accent is going to have some problems, maybe I'll be a quiet person in Thai, which is better for a monk, right? So might be a good thing, a blessing in disguise. Okay, so
let me make another comment about hours,
okay,
so that you get a sense of what goes into an hour of understandable input. Right?
okay,
This is actually not an easy thing to create in your own life. And with YouTube and videos and things, it's a lot easier now.
hmm
But if you think, oh, I'm going to go to Thailand and live in Thailand, start to think about, right? How do you get one full hour of happenings where
yeah,
you're understanding what's going on?
very
And it's all
difficult.
happening in Thai. Really, really difficult.
Yeah,
So, for me to be able to do 7 hours in a day or 6 hours in a day, that was like
magic,
that
right?
that was gold,
Yeah,
because you can't create that. Oh, I'm going to go live in a Thai household.
yeah,
All right, well, most of the time they're going to be busy doing what they do. They're going to spend a lot of time talking to each other and doing things that you don't understand.
yeah. The kids
And
get
it's
time with
hard
other
work.
kids, which is where a lot of that comes from. When they
Yes. Yeah. So yeah. Now, if you want to get something understandable, you got to go to a kindergarten.
yeah.
And if you're 5 you know, 45 years old already in a kindergarten. That's a bit
creepy.
difficult to let that's creepy for sure. so so that's the challenge of when we say an hour of understanding what's going on. It's not easy to create that.
Right.
Yeah. So with environment, that's the uh, thing. Now
Okay.
let's move on. Yeah.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And it crashed. All right. That's not a good thing.
No worries. What? Okay, so we lost David. Let me give him the link. Okay. Hold on a second, guys. We're going to try to get David back. I'm going to stay in this studio for a while till he's back. Okay. Hello, David.
Hello again.
All right. So let me know
I'm
when
not,
you get your. What's up?
yeah, I'm not sure exactly what happened, but it wasn't totally unexpected because we've been having trouble with this.
Okay.
Try it again.
Yeah, well, it's really so while you're doing that, let's go back to me and what do you suggest I do? Because I'm at the point where I'm watching Thai dramas and I'm understanding enough to watch it without subtitles and enjoy it.
Yep.
So my listening is, and then like podcasts, like a lot of podcasts and news, I'm understanding a lot. So I know my understanding is well beyond 60%. And yet, a lot of times when I speak, I kind of have to think about it, and sometimes, especially like more complex things, and my accent is like crappy. So, and a lot of times with the tones, because and I know that all of this is coming from, two things. One, the mistakes I made in the beginning, learning the wrong way, and then when I did comprehensible input, I still was speaking because I didn't understand the silent period. And then third, even after I stopped speaking, because I didn't understand the method fully, I was still thinking about words and grabbing words sometimes.
Yeah.
So my understanding is like really good now. It's still improving. It's not perfect, but if I had started pure ALG and did the method right, I should be speaking naturally and much more than I am now. So
I don't know. That
you don't.
that would be the only place I'd stop you and question.
Okay. So maybe I'm expecting too much for where I'm at.
Yeah. So let me deal with that. And I believe it or not, I have a slide for that. All right.
Okay. Sweet.
And so let me see if I can make it work for us. It's common for people to feel like I should be further along than I am.
Mm-hmm.
All right. The first area that comes up is I should be understanding more than I do.
Uh-huh.
The
Which
second part is I should be speaking more than I can.
I've had that one. Yeah.
All right. So let's look at that from here's what I think's going on kind of a situation. All right. And I'm going to try this share again.
Okay.
So let's see. My computer, see if my slides. Okay. I'm just looking at the share option here and it's got to be my screen. So here we go. Does that work?
I'm not seeing it shared here. I should see 3 tiles. I see only 2. I see me and you, and then once you share, there it is.
There it is.
Okay. Once you move to the presentation, I'll add it to the stream.
Let's see if I get there. There it is.
Perfect. All right.
And all right. As a slideshow, it's not working for me.
Huh.
Let's try the
Yeah.
PDF. All right.
Yeah.
I'm going to just throw
Sure.
this away. The PDF's a little bit rougher,
Okay. No worries.
but okay. Let's turn that off and all right.
Hmm.
Now you can see this one, right? We looked at this slide. Does
It's a
that look
lot
hard
smaller.
to see? Huh?
It is a lot smaller. I think on a phone that would be pretty tough. Is there any way for you to full screen that, or is that just or zoom in
Yeah, let
maybe?
me give it a try.
Because I got a super big screen, so I'm able to kind of make it out. But if you're on a
Plan
phone,
B. Yep,
plan
plan
B.
B. Sorry about that.
No worries.
All right.
Oh, the other thing we could do, David, is I could share it and then you could talk about it. Would that work?
That would work. Why don't you get that up and I'll keep trying while in the meantime. So
Yeah,
let's
that
do
sounds
that.
good. Okay. All right. Okay. Downloads. Maybe the PDF will work. Okay. Yeah, this is not bad at all. This will definitely work. And what's like? Okay, so hold on. Before we do that, I'm just going to share
I
my
might.
screen
Okay.
because that'll
Why
be
don't you give me one more shot at this, will you?
sure. Okay, I'm taking mine off.
All right.
This is yours, huh? No, that's mine. I think it. Have you shared yet?
Nope.
Okay, I'm
You
gonna.
ready?
Yeah.
All right.
Everyone's being very patient here. Thank you guys for
Much
holding on with us
appreciated.
through these technical issues. David shared a lot of really awesome things so far. So we've talked about the importance of a foundation and also the idea of what a child does versus what an adult does. Okay, David's got a screen. Awesome. We're back.
Okay.
We're back. Sweet.
So the misconception, the first one that we talked about is this idea that I should understand more language than I do. And this is an important distinction because in an ALG or a real life setting, right, the learner shouldn't be thinking about language.
Right.
They should be thinking about what's going on here. And your access to what's going on is actually initially more through your eyes than it is through your ears.
Yeah.
So I think of it as learning to listen with your eyes.
Okay.
Okay. And you're past that. What I'm hearing you say, Jonathan, is you're understanding language at about 60, maybe 65% of what you're hearing. Now, there's an easy way to test that. You know, you go to let's say it's a news broadcast.
Right.
Right, on TV, Thai TV news.
Yeah.
Not a movie. Don't use a movie. That's
right.
a bad one, right? But a news broadcast. And you don't know the news for the day, but you're understanding in a news broadcast 40 to 50% of what they're saying. That's a good bar. It doesn't mean that's not exactly 40 or 50% of the language, but that's a benchmark that we know what that means, right?
Right.
You can go into a restaurant and understand 60% of what the Thai people are saying to each other. They're not talking to you, so it's a little bit passive. It's better that way.
Well,
now,
unfortunately, I don't have that environment here.
Not an environment you can do that with, right?
Right.
I could get on the bus here and do the same thing, right? Oh, I get it. Now, up until that time, what have you been doing? Well, you've been watching a lot, looking at things, figuring it out, guessing what's going on.
Right.
And most of us, I think, are impatient with this whole process. Children don't even know there's a process happening. They're not impatient with anything because they're not trying to get somewhere.
Right.
And that is so big. That's such a huge thing, right? If you think about learning a new language, it should take longer than a year or two. It's a very complex thing, and the only way to really become fluent is to give it the time it takes. But most of the understanding early on, it comes from what you see,
Yeah.
not from what you hear. All right, and so that's the first misconception that people face. The second one is I should be further along than I really am.
Oh, David, let's
And
go back to the last
you want to
slide,
go back?
please. Yes.
All right.
Make sure we squeezed all the juice out of this slide. So basically, the slide is telling us, don't be impatient. You're going to start out understanding almost entirely from what you see rather than what you're hearing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I see this at the bottom. You should not try to speak and try not to catch words or translate.
Right.
Both of these are big things for adults, right? Because adults are trying to intentionally learn the language. I've had kind of an aha moment here with a lot of things that you've said that I knew theoretically before, but it's kind of sinking in, like why and how. But yeah, these are big. I just want people to realize when you're starting out, you're going to understand almost none of the language. That's fine. Don't worry about that. Use your eyes, focus on what you're seeing, and don't speak, and don't try to say, oh, this word or that word. Don't think about the words, and don't translate. David, do you have any to add to that before we move on?
Well, the big one isn't even here at all.
Okay.
All right. So all the stuff that I've said here, the big one is just get comfortable guessing about it.
Okay.
I could hear in my mind, someone reading this and say, well, what am I supposed to do if I don't understand?
Yeah.
Well, take a guess. There's nothing you've got to understand about experiencing life. There's nothing right or wrong about any of it. So just take a guess and go on living life and experiencing life. Because when we think about that whole place a kid's not trying to get somewhere, not trying to learn that language. There's no place he needs to be mentally or needs to do, Now, I can remember watching my son. He was about 6. How old was he? 4. I don't think he was 6 months. I think he was a little less than 6 months old.
Okay.
The first time he crawled off the bed and I didn't catch him in time. He was an active kid, and he crawled off the bed, fell onto the floor, and then sat there for the longest time looking up and down, figuring out what just happened. Because, we aren't born knowing this thing about depth and the relationship between, why doesn't the bed and everything else I see just extend out? We have no idea.
Right.
I remember watching him learn that. Right. Now, my second son fell many times before he learned that one because he was just too active and he didn't care about getting hurt. He didn't seem to feel it. But my oldest son, he crawled right off the bed and landed on his head on the floor. Well, maybe not his head, but it was a stunning situation. He wasn't hurt by it, but it stunned him.
Yeah.
And he sat and figured that out, Well, he took some guesses, didn't he? That's what we all do. And his guesses didn't need to be right because he's going to experience depth or that whole concept more in life going forward, and it's going to self-correct.
Right.
If it doesn't self-correct, there's something in the way. But we've grown up with learning, thinking we've got to get something right. Well, life will tell you what's right. Just keep going with it. And that's the biggest key that I think there is in this whole idea, this whole concept, is getting comfortable guessing.
Yeah.
If we come back to listening with your eyes, one of the things I tell people to do, just try it. Go into a restaurant that's so big you can't hear what people are saying on the other end of the restaurant, and then watch them. Not in a way that they get uncomfortable or see you watching them, but just watch people who are having an argument and try to figure out what it is they're arguing about. you don't have to find out, because the point is not did you understand correctly or not.
Yeah.
It's an exercise in getting comfortable guessing again, because kids, that's all they can do.
Right.
They don't have anything else. And the importance of the guess is huge. The importance of guessing is this. When I don't know something and I guess, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm open to whatever else comes in around that whole idea. So if I'm guessing that they're arguing about, one of them borrowed the car and got a scratch on it, and the other one's upset because their car now is scratched, that's my guess.
Okay.
Now, and then later, I get some more input around that whole situation. It's not a problem for me to figure out it wasn't the car they were talking about. He was talking about his new shoes. Oh, okay. So they scratched his shoe. Well, it wasn't really a scratch even. Now it's more input coming in, more defining stuff coming in. And it's like, okay, oh, now it wasn't even scratched. It was just they bumped his shoes. He just had them polished, and now there's a scuff on them. And he's particular about that kind of thing. So the guy's a little bit of, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. So as more input comes in, my guess gets more and more accurate. And this is realistic to life. That's how we live. And that's how language comes from. So it's not important at all that we get something right to begin with. Oh, I know what that means now. Blocks all the new stuff from coming in. As soon as you say, I know what that means, you closed off to further input. And that knowing is one of the things we stick right in the way of it all. And it keeps us from the whole mode of, oh, I know what that means, keeps us from hearing anything new.
Yeah.
Now this is a scientifically documented situation. This is also the reason why in science a lot of times why do people have often asked, why do breakthroughs come from people who aren't the real experts in a field?
Yeah, they're open.
And it's often the case. They're open to stuff. The experts have learned what doesn't work, and they don't go there.
Right.
So they don't learn new things. They already know. And it's that knowing that blocks you to things that, and it's not a bad thing about experts. It's just something you got to be aware of. It exists. With language, it's not important to know something is right. And the same thing happens again. If I say, oh, this word means that word, and I'm going from Thai to English or from Chinese to something else or whatever, right? Well, it's the same problem now. I'm saying that, I love the word pig in English, moo in Thai, because the first thing I found were people who had a nickname of moo, and why would someone call themselves pig? Well, the simple answer is moo and pig doesn't mean the same thing. Yeah, it's the same animal, I get it, but culturally it's different. And as long as I kept saying moo means pig, then every time I'd see someone, oh, what's your name, moo? Oh, hi, moo. And I'm thinking pig. It's like, I got to shake my head. The guy's an idiot. Why does he? And then girls call themselves that too.
Yeah.
Even girls who aren't fat, and some are. And it's just like, why are you, what is that about?
Yeah.
And it's a derogatory put down word in English, or, if it's used as slang, it's a cop. It's a slang word for cop. It's a slang word, for someone who eats too much or eats rudely, or, is pushy. Get out of the way, you fat pig, kind of, it's slanderous words. And here's the people walking around calling themselves, oh, what's your name, moo?
Yeah, the connections are totally different.
And as long as I'm saying moo means pig, I'm blocked. And I can't help it. I've stuck something in the way of learning what does moo mean.
Right.
So I often tell people a wrong guess is much better than a right answer in learning a language.
I love that.
Yeah. You don't have to know. You don't have to know what's going on. You don't have to be right about it.
Yeah.
You're just making guesses and going with the flow.
You do have to be observant, and you do have to, keep taking in input, but you don't have to be right now.
And there's a lot of people who don't get that part too, and they think, oh, if I just turn on Thai in the background, it's gonna help me. It will
Mm-hmm.
probably also get in the way.
Mm.
All right, and I'll tell you what happens there is you learn to tune it out,
Mm-hmm.
and then you don't want to tune out what you're hearing.
Mm.
You want to tune in, not out.
Got
Now
it.
this is a challenge, right? You're not tuning into language, but you're tuning into what's going on.
Yeah.
So if you're turning on the TV in the background and say, I'm listening to Thai in the background and that's going to help me,
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing, right, that in most cases that's not a good thing. It's probably not helpful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that's focusing on the language, because there's no way you're focusing on the happening, right? Because you're
I
also
don't even think it's focusing on the language, but you're right about that. It's thinking that the language in the background is going to be, your brain's going to do something with this noise.
yeah,
And what
yeah,
your brain does with noise is filter it out.
yeah,
That's that's what we
yeah,
know. And so if you turn on this background noise, pretty soon you just stop hearing it.
right. Yeah.
And that's what
Uh,
your brain will do with it because there's no experience attached.
right. Well,
Yeah.
I've done a lot of listening to things while I'm doing other things, but not with the idea that I'm learning through osmosis, but that I'll pay a little bit of attention to it while I do it.
Mhm.
And I've actually like had some aha moments where I figured things out. Like you have a story about driving and the radio was on, right? And
Yes.
so so I think it's possible to use that in a certain way, but it's also possible to use it in a wrong way, right?
So when I drive, I do listen to the radio and or listen to podcasts or news or whatever.
Right.
Sometimes music.
Mhm.
And if you do the same thing, you probably experience the same thing I do. If someone starts talking to you, you completely tune out whatever's on the radio in order to listen to them. It's like I don't even know what they've been talking about for the last 10 minutes because I was having this conversation with so and so.
Sure, sure.
Someone calls you on the phone, not even aware there's music on in the background now, right?
Yeah.
And so yeah, we can filter out things and then come back to them. And sure, it's a way to get some exposure.
Yeah. But you have to pay some attention to it. You can't be like, I'm learning by osmosis and, put a book here. I'm reading this book now.
Yes, no, that's right. It takes some focus of your attention.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So Sean has a question here. So going back to the idea of visuals, right? How much
Yep.
do you think the widespread use of masks can impair us learning from what we can see? So we're talking about covering the mouth, but you can still see things going on. So what do you think?
If I was learning Thai or a language and the teacher had to wear a mask, I don't think I would try to do it. I wouldn't. I think you're limiting half the facial expression.
Mm,
There's so much packed into that. For me, that would be a total breakdown
yeah.
of the ability to communicate. Look, I try to pay attention to what people are saying when they're wearing masks, and it's hard to understand them, not because of the sound so much,
Mm,
but because you can't see what is their face saying.
uh,
There's all kinds of things that get packed into that are vital to
yeah.
communicating. Yeah. So for me, I think that's a huge one. It's a
Mm,
great question because it's a problem. In social media, you don't have any of the cues that you get with interacting one on one,
okay.
right? And that's a big problem in society now because we're taking out something that's so vital to us understanding one another.
Right.
And that one-on-one, not one-on-one interaction directly as much as
Yeah.
just being able to get the
See.
meaning through everything else. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
huge.
And there's a lot of misunderstandings online. Actually, I many months ago, I had an misunderstanding with a a Thai teacher online. I said something that I thought was just really casual in a space that I thought was just a public space, a very theoretical, just casual statement about something, and she saw it as an insult in a space that was her space, and
Yes.
she went all out with all kinds of attack, and so I like had to have Facebook like cease and desist her attacks and stuff, you know. And then she went on YouTube and made a video about it, and I was like, what the hell? So yeah, definitely people can have, especially
Yeah.
cross culture, right? You know,
Yes.
on social
Yes.
media.
Yes. And there's so much lost. You know, I was thinking back. My friend who was in language school the same time I was during the time I first came to Thailand, he was also studying Thai, not with ALG. And we both rode motorcycles. And he told me this story. It just made us both laugh so hard. But he would come into the class and he'd carry his helmet into the class and he'd sit it on the seat beside him for class. And for the longest time, his teacher would get visibly uncomfortable. Every day he'd come in and she would get visibly uncomfortable. Until finally one day she just looked at him, would you stop doing that? She walks over, picks his helmet from the seat and puts it up on the file cabinet.
Oh.
And he had to figure out what was the problem. But especially with the older generation of Thais, right? Things that have to do with lower parts of the body from anything, feet, your butt, sitting on your butt, all of that. Your head is held in a higher place. So anything related to the head can't go down on the place where you're sitting. And it was just like, it was completely a problem for her. And he learned that mostly through her body language. Now, if she'd have been wearing a mask, that wouldn't have been a problem. He'd have still realized she was upset about something, I'm sure. But it's an interesting thing. Without that, the language itself doesn't convey anything, right? The body language conveyed all the meaning, and the language is like,
the tone too,
what are they even talking about, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
The sound, like you could hear probably the disturbance in the voice too, right? The tone of voice and so on.
Yes, yes. And that's all the meaning was in that, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, you know, Twitter doesn't, it leaves something to be desired, I think.
For sure. All right, David. So misconception number one, I should understand more language than I do. So again, back to patience. So is there anything else we want to talk about this one, or should we go on to misconception number two?
I don't know. I think that's up to you. I don't have anything else.
Okay. All right. Well, let's move on then.
Okay. So the second one is, I should be further along than I really am. Now, there's this thing going on, and I think about it as being in the middle of the ocean or the middle of the lake, maybe is a better way to say it.
Okay.
Experience. And when you start in a program like an ALG program, right? You start out with no language. That's a great place to start. And every day you're aware, you're feeling like you're learning something. You feel like and you're flooded with all this language. You know, 1 hour of ALG is a lot. And if you do like I did 6 or 7 hours a day, you just showered. It's like living in a lake all the time and you've never had water in your life before. It's just like, oh, all this water, it's wonderful.
Yeah.
Until you do it for a while, and then you don't feel like you're in the water anymore. And if any of you have ever filled a swimming pool, even a small swimming pool with a hose, you know, at first you put the hose in there and the pool's dry, and then you turn on the water and it comes out, and you look at it start to slowly spread across the bottom of the pool, and you see, and you think, oh, well, in 20 minutes, we're going to have a lot of water in here. You come back in 20 minutes and it's barely, you know, an inch high at the bottom of the pool. And you realize it's going to take a long time. And that's a bit of the experience, and you come back 2 hours later and it's not even half full yet, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the experience of learning the language is a lot like that. At first, you feel like I'm really getting something, and then the sense of I'm kind of out in the middle of the lake and I don't even know I'm rowing, but I don't know if I'm getting anywhere because there's no reference. That is going to be true no matter how you learn the language. But in an ALG program, it's really difficult when you get to that 30-40% level of acquisition to feel like you're learning.
Mm.
All right. And I think in the whole process, this is the most difficult time. That's where people jump ship. I can swim faster than this, so they start to put in a lot of effort to do things that at the beginning it didn't make sense, but now it makes sense. This is taking too long. I should be further along than I really am. How it really feels is like that little you go along, you're on a plateau for a long time, and then you get this jump.
Yeah.
And you feel that jump. You've experienced this, right? And you feel like all of a sudden it's like, wow, I've really progressed in the last month.
Right.
And then you go along and the plateau is longer, the second one or the third one, it's longer. And then the jump is there, but it's smaller. And then you go on this longer plateau and then a smaller jump even. And you keep going through these kind of experiences. I think what's really happening is very similar to the picture of the V-shaped cup with the faucet flowing in.
Okay.
The actual rate of if you see how fast is that water level going up, that rate slows down because the width of the width is much greater the farther you go. Repetition is less. The number of words you're learning that have to link up with other words.
Yes,
and things
I've
like
noticed that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All of that, it takes more time.
Yeah.
And it's just broader. And the rate of input can stay the same, right? Doesn't matter. You're going to feel that slowing down. There's no reason to think it slows down.
Yeah.
But it feels like it does for sure. You can't deny that feeling.
This is totally, oh man, especially within the last month, I've had these thoughts too, especially connected to, the ceiling effect you were talking about earlier and all the unnatural stuff I did before. But I think a lot of my anxiousness lately is simply this right here that you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah. It has nothing to do with ceiling. This part doesn't. So put that to rest. And to be honest, with the ceiling thing, you're not going to be aware of it until someone else points it out. So don't even worry about it.
Okay.
All right. But this one you're totally aware of. And it's an illusion. It's all just an illusion. Here, all I know to do is use logic. The logic is if I'm putting in, if I'm getting 2 hours of input, and that's what I've been doing the whole time, then it's going ahead in the same rate it's been going always. It's just linking up with a whole lot more than it ever needed to link up to before. So those links, when you realize, when you learn a new tune, it, right? When you learn a new word, you can feel that.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff you learn, you're not conscious of, and your brain is just linking things up, and then you get conscious of it after the fact. Someone says something, you realize that's sort of a word you don't know, but you knew. Now all of a sudden you know it. How did I learn that word? You don't even think about it really. Yeah, and so what your brain is able to link and network together, right? I think one of the best examples for me in this whole idea of the neural linking up of things. If you think about a certain word having a frequency, all right, and the word I use for this in my own mind is always bird.
Okay.
As a kid, I have these varied experiences with birds.
Right.
One, I had a neighbor who was an evil person, and he caught a pigeon and lit it on fire and threw it into the other neighbor's backyard.
Seriously?
Yeah, it was just terrible.
Holy
So I got this burnt pigeon
Jesus.
and tried to nurse him back to health, and he died. All right, so I remember that. He lived a couple days. Wasn't
Damn. That's intense.
I remember the first bird I found that had fallen out of a nest, and I hand raised that one. It had no feathers or anything, and I hand fed him until he grew old enough and could fly, and I let him go. And that whole experience was just fantastic. Okay. So when I think of the word bird, what does that word do? That single word, bird, it lights up in my memory all these experiences I've had where somehow bird is related. I remember I must have been 5 years old. My grandmother would take me, if any of you are familiar with Knott's Berry Farm in Southern California, I don't even know if it's still there, but it's in Anaheim or something like that. And my grandmother would take me to Knott's Berry Farm, and we sat along this lake or beside this lake that they had and fed ducks. And I haven't thought about that for years and years, but the word bird brings that memory to the surface of my brain.
Okay.
Right? Because for me, a duck is a bird.
Right.
I relate to ducks along with other birds. Right. I can remember this pet crow I had once, and I was just married not long, and I had this crow. He liked to fly up, circle around, and then he'd steal the dog's food. The dog would come and run at him, and then he'd fly off again, and he'd get a piece of dog's food every circle. And he had the most fun teasing the dog. I haven't thought about that for years and years.
Right.
Okay. But just this one bird, it's like it turns on this one word. Bird turns on this frequency where all the memories of bird come to the surface for me.
Yeah.
Right? Well, that's lighting up something in my head around this word bird. Well, think about how many things get lit up with that one word bird. For example, words that start with B, or nouns, or flying things,
right,
or all of that. And this one bird starts to go out in all these branches of things in my head. I can just follow that, surfing the net. Now I surf these little neural pathways in my head.
Right.
And so that whole experience for me, it kind of highlights how does language get there in the first place. It comes through this experience, and then another one, and then another one.
Yeah.
And each experience has a similar frequency that's out there and your brain just connects them based on those frequencies. So you get these networks of things that we're just beginning to understand a little bit about, we don't really get it. Yeah. So that's what that is.
The point is that you're going to feel in the beginning like you're making rapid progress. Gradually, even though you're putting in the same amount of time with the same quality of input, the subjective feeling is it's going to go slower. You're going to reach a point where you're going to get anxious. Don't stop. Realize that's normal. Keep going.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, there's no easy way out there just to get it. I can't pump it into you.
Okay.
It would be great to have this language syringe, stick it in your ear and just push it in, That would be awesome.
Like Matrix style, huh?
Yeah.
All right,
Give me the download for that one.
Yeah. But eventually it does fill up. Just keep filling it and don't stop. So here we have a question. Great talk, guys. To the prior point, I was wondering whether the guessing would involve thinking out loud in your native language in your head.
So I think that's part of something adults do that gets in the way.
Okay.
Now, I've seen a lot of students. I know a lot of students, and some of the ones who've had problems are the ones who can take a Thai phrase that has something about it that can make it a play on words in English and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
and turn it into a joke of some sort.
Hmm.
A little bit like, the word moo, which is the word for pig in Thai, moo. Oh, that sounds like the sound a cow makes,
Oh.
And connecting stuff that way and turning it into jokes sometimes and stuff like that. That's a major problem. Always. Now, if that's not the meaning here in this question, right?
No, the meaning is,
I
so
think
let's say we're watching a video and they're doing something and you're thinking, okay, are they talking about a car? Oh, I think they're talking about the car now. And that guessing process is in your native language.
So
That's
there's an interesting linguistic question underlying this.
okay.
And it's whether or not you think in words or not.
Mm.
And a lot of people say they do, and a lot of people say they don't. And I'm not sure there's a right answer to that one, right? But I'm not sure about that at all. But it's an interesting question. Without language, are you able to think? And does verbalizing something, I mean, so there's a lot underlying that question that I don't know the answer to.
Here's my take on it. People are able to do both, right? Because obviously, if a human was a feral child and they didn't learn any language, their animals still think. I mean, thinking is possible. You can think in pictures and so on. However, when you do learn a language, sometimes you can think in the language, right? That some people do it more than others, right? But well, hold on,
but
David.
The experience of people who don't think, the experience of people who don't have a language, right, and then they gain language,
right.
And when they talk about life before having language, it's like they weren't able to think. A lot of people have that. Yes.
Oh, wow.
There's some interesting research about all of that and stuff like that. Very interesting stuff.
Interesting. So my point is, but the point I was going to say is this: whatever is spontaneous is okay, but don't
try to do it on purpose.
Right. What would you agree with that, David?
Yes. I don't think you can do much. If you're not doing it on purpose, you can't do anything wrong.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Don't work at it, and you're going to be fine.
Okay.
What happens with adults is a better way to say that is if a 2-year-old doesn't do it, you don't need to either.
Got it.
So am I trying to figure this out in English, or because that's the language I have?
Yeah.
I don't know if something happens, my experience in Thai, I can retell what happened in Thai or English. Right? If my wife says something to me, usually I don't remember, did she say it in Thai or English?
I've had that experience too with Chinese. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure that language is important there. What I remember is what happened.
Yeah.
And that's normal.
Yeah. All right, I want to read this to make sure there's not another question. And are you even supposed to be aware of that guessing process? That's an interesting question too.
It's a very interesting question, and yes, you are. Be aware of it. Know you're guessing and get comfortable with it. It's a good thing to be aware of that and to consciously guess.
Okay.
Yeah. Very, very. No one's ever asked me that before. That's a fantastic question. Yeah.
All right. Excellent. So if you have any more of those fantastic questions, keep them coming. But if not, David, is there anything else on this slide you want to mention?
No, not on this slide. And I think this is the end.
Okay, great. Cool.
I have one more slide that we didn't talk about.
Yes.
Actually, two. What are these? Let's see.
Ah.
Okay. Oh, this one about speaking. This is good.
Okay.
All right. So here I'm making a comparison.
Right.
All right. Between the experience of people who speak early compared to the experience of people who let that foundation sink in. All right. Both of these students, the gray and the yellow, those are two different people.
Okay.
Okay. The difference, main difference is one started speaking right away, and the other person began speaking at about 800 hours naturally.
Okay.
And
Oh, 800, huh?
yeah.
Is that
Now
800 before? Sorry, David. Before that 800, are you saying like little words here and there, or are you talking 800? That's where you're starting to speak complete sentences and so
that's
on.
where you're starting to improvise sentences sometimes.
Okay.
I
So before
wasn't. I didn't speak at that level. I didn't speak until like 1200 hours, and it was bad experience trying. It was uncomfortable experience for me.
really?
Yeah. Yeah. I was a late speaker.
Hmm. Okay.
I think I was in real life too. I don't remember, but
Mm-hmm.
from what my mom said.
Got it. Got it. Okay. So is it
Um,
possible? Is it if someone only has like say 500, 600 hours, and the word "sawadi crap" or "kapkun crap" comes up
or
in their mind?
Thai, or my Thai, or Pai Lao
Right.
Cup, whatever.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, something simple like that. Is it okay if they say it spontaneously, or should they wait?
I
Like
think
what?
they should. The
Okay,
basic rule is the one to follow, and that is this: if it's there, say it.
got it, got it.
If it's not, don't try to make it come out.
Okay,
That's the basic. That for me is the rule.
right.
And then you don't have to worry about defining, well, what do you mean by speaking? So that I can be
Uh-huh.
right and know I'm doing the right thing.
Right.
Think about the
Automatic.
2-year-old. Do
Yeah.
they worry about should I speak or not yet? They don't
Mm,
think about it.
mm.
So if you're truly in a mode of not worrying about it and it's
Yeah,
there, use it.
got it.
Now, it's not easy to do that as an adult because we all try without wanting to. We try because we've learned that trying is the way to do it.
Right. Okay, so this is a great slide. Can you go back to? Sorry for interrupting. Can you go back to breaking it down for us?
Yeah, so both of these students are at 500 hours. So if you take the intersection of the red lines, follow it down, they're at exactly the same point of time investment.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
And what are we measuring? All right. At 500 hours, is this person, this gray person, Mr. Gray and Mr. Yellow, perhaps, or something. I
Right.
don't know.
Sure.
The gray person at 500 hours, they're going to be the person getting all the praise. The person at the top, the yellow person, no idea. You've studied for 500 hours and you can't say anything in Thai yet. That's what they're going to be dealing with.
Right.
You're in the wrong school, buddy.
Short-term thinking.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And there's no escaping this, right?
Yeah.
This is exact. How do you measure that 40% compared with the 20% of the gray person? How do you measure that? 40 compared to what is it? 45 compared to 21%.
Mm.
How do you measure that difference? And that's the challenge for the student as well as everyone else. Um, as a student, that's where you're going to deal with it. That's right there is like, I've spent 500 hours and I get all the praise because I can say, I can speak up to 20% of the Thai language. That's a lot. You know, that's someone who can definitely get around saying a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Their future may not be great, but they don't know that. They think they're going to just keep going.
Right.
Problem is, you get to the plateau, you get to that place, you're not going to keep increasing. And it might end up being 60%. It might end up being 70%. It very, ever rarely goes beyond that. You rarely ever find a foreigner who's studied through structural means that gets better than 70% in a language like Thai. Now, you can find some people on occasion who, you know, they've learned Spanish and they can do that from English to Spanish, for example. They can do that, but they're not that common still. As easy as that transition is from English to Spanish, it's not that common to find foreigners who have really great pronunciation of Spanish, which is surprising. You'd think it would be an easy thing.
Yeah. It would be if they did it the natural way, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So, yep.
So the key point here is, in the long run, if we take a long-term view, ALG, the natural way, is the fastest way to truly acquiring the language, to truly being able to speak as close to what a native would be able to speak for that given individual, wherever their ceiling may be. However, the key trap, and this, maybe we should coin a term for this. I'm not sure what it was, but there's a trap where in the short term, it looks like the structural way is faster. And so people being impatient and not really understanding the whole process get sucked in. And something trap. We need to coin a term for that. But it's like you get sucked into this short-term thinking where you think, okay, this is faster. In truth, 20 years from now, for most people, they're not going to be that different than they were at, say, 1,000 hours. Whereas the person who's doing this 20 years from now, you know, crazy.
Just like your native language keeps improving and developing, so does the language you acquire.
Yeah.
Right? I've put in this aspect of goals here, though, because, you know, and the idea that your goals might be in conflict isn't that uncommon. It's pretty common.
Okay.
For people to have as a goal, well, short term, I want to be able to speak as much as I can. Long term, I want to be fluent. Those are not compatible goals.
Hold on a second, David. Goal one is what?
I want to say as much as I can short term. I want to get around and speak and talk and make a lot of friends as much as I can right now. Goal two, I want to be fluent in this language.
Got it. And they are in conflict.
Those two goals are not compatible.
Mm-hmm. It's like the house you were talking about, right?
Totally.
It's like I want to be able to cook in that kitchen tomorrow versus I want to have a kitchen that'll be here 20 years from now.
Correct. Yeah. And you know, the fact is you live with your long-term results a lot longer than you do with your short-term results, right?
Yes, sir.
Those are the ones that stay with you.
Yeah.
So I try to get everyone to look long-term. What is it you want 5 years from now, not 3 months from now?
Yeah.
What are you looking to achieve? If you feel like 70% of the language is enough for you, then it may not matter how you study. Do whatever you want. If 70% fluency is good enough for you, then it doesn't matter. 60%, you'll settle for that. Go for it. But I'll guarantee you, when you get to 60%, you're going to feel that 40% you don't know, big time.
Hold on, David. Hold on, David. This is an amazing point, and actually, we have someone, Michelle, who actually pulled that out because it's so beautiful. But before we do that, I just want to tell people the structural method only works to get you to that 70% if you are in Thailand interacting with Thai people. Like or you're getting input somewhere. All right, you're getting input somewhere. It does
It
not
doesn't have
work
to be in
if you're
Thailand.
thoroughly
The
studying
geography isn't important.
Right. What's important is the input. You're still going to need input. Like I learned German 4 years in school, right? And I did. I was like the best student in the class. I know no German now, right? And I did not get to 70% in German. My wife and so many other Chinese people, 10, 12 years of learning English, they're nowhere close to 70%. So
Right.
even if you go the structural way, you still need input. So I just wanted to make that like super clear for people. The books alone are not going to get you to 70% ever. Let's go back to this beautiful point of David's that it's worth putting on a bumper sticker or a t-shirt. All right. Those who achieve 70% fluency feel their inabilities more than their abilities. David, please unpack this for us and talk about it a little bit.
Well, if all I ever do is spend 2 weeks on vacation in Thailand every 2 years, I come here for 2 weeks and then I go back, it probably doesn't matter if I'm fluent or not. And the best thing for me might be to learn, 20% of whatever I can learn any way I want, just so I can go to a bar and make a friend, or talk to someone, or play basketball with this guy and chat with him about something that doesn't really matter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, 20%'s enough. But if I put in the investment of time to actually have a kitchen,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And 2 years from now, that thing's sinking because it's got no foundation. You have to question, right? Was there something wrong in this whole way we thought about this? I understand that budget was important. I get it. But the person who spent less money is the one with the longer view.
Yes, absolutely.
And in language, it's exactly the same thing. So it's very important to think about, what are you gonna ever be happy with 70%? What do you do with that? And when you say 70% to someone who's learned a language, that sounds like a lot until you say 30%.
Mm.
Oh, wow, you're right. There's 30% I don't know. And I won't ever know. I won't ever get there. That's a big deal when you think about it.
Yeah.
That's 3 out of every 10 words.
Especially if you're living there, right? And you want to live your life in the language.
Especially, yeah, exactly right. So there's something to that. 70% sounds a lot when you're at 10%.
Yeah.
And so people always, when I was in language school at when I first came to Thailand, we started in a group of 18 people.
Mm.
And 1 year later, 5 of us had continued in the program to the point of 1 year.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 of the 5 had actually done it the way it was designed to do. The rest, everyone else, quit along the way or
Thought about it.
added stuff to it, did other things.
Yeah. Got it.
In the end, out of those 5, I think the only 3 of us who are alive, or the only 2 of us who are alive, are the 2 that did it right. So maybe that means something. I don't know. I think the other 3 guys are dead by now. But
that's hilarious.
But it said something, because the results we had at the end of a year were obvious that doing this the way that just naturally was superior.
Yeah.
We both demonstrated greater ability. And I said, well, we weren't really speaking at that point. No, but 2 years after that, we were, all of us.
Yeah.
And you could hear these guys are like Thai and those guys are not.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. That's what I'm dealing with now.
Yeah.
Doing it the wrong way in the beginning long term, you know what I mean? You really kick
Yeah.
yourself when you
Yeah.
realize
Yeah.
you've been making those mistakes.
Yeah.
Now, David, please. This brings me to this point, back to what we were talking about earlier. And Sean, I know a lot of the people watching Comprehensible Tie now are actually not people who've started with ALG. So they haven't started with this method. There are some now, but not many. Most of us are people who started, you could call it, let's say, just the structural
Doing
way.
something. Yeah. Started doing something.
Right.
Yeah.
Sean here is also like that. Where do learners go that have started speaking early? Can they also jump on the comprehensible input method, or have they missed the boat?
No. So there's first of all, what you've done to this point is what you've done to this point. Be like a kid. No kid worries about it, so don't you. There's just nothing you can do about it. It's been done.
Right.
The effect or impact that has had is as varied as the things you've done. So, I mean, you find 100 people, they've done 100 different things.
Right.
So the impact is going to be 100 different kinds of impact. It's all fine. It's what it is.
That said, wherever you're at, you can only benefit from switching to this way, right? Yes or no?
Yes. And the only people I don't recommend this to are people who don't care to listen to anyone else. All they want to do is talk. So, you know, I've had people come and literally tell me, I don't care to hear what anyone else has to say. My job is to say things and people have to listen to me. I said, well, you know, this isn't the right school for you. You shouldn't be here. Because if you and it wasn't even about respect. Their job was to make, you know, to say things, and people who worked in that company needed to take what they said and make it work, you know. So that was their role in that particular case. But I've always questioned the reality, you know, the idea that what I have to say is more important than what someone else has to say. So for me, it always made sense that I really needed to listen to someone if I expect them to listen to me, right? It's just sort of that simple logic, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, if someone asked me, and they did when I first started in this, is it more important to listen or to speak? And if you stop and think about that, it's a good thing to do, I think, is to really ask yourself that. Would I rather, if I had to choose, would I rather be able to hear and understand, or say things and have people understand me? If you have to make a choice, which would it be? You know, for me, I'd much rather be dumb and be able to hear,
right,
than to be deaf and be able to speak.
But eventually, if you do the method, you'll be able to do both. So in the short term, it's just a theoretical question, because your speaking will lag behind listening.
No.
You're going to get impatient. Now, Sean actually has an interesting point here, and I'm going to put it up on the board or screen or whatever here in a moment. But I want to preface it by saying I see this a lot in terms of the percent of people who reach this level compared to the structural method. It's super low. So I would call these people outliers.
Tell me that I'm not following that.
Okay. I'm prefacing what we're going to say. So,
okay.
Like me, when I went to China, so absolutely for the structural approach, getting to 70% in Chinese for most people, even people living in China, is they're probably not even going to get to 70%. However, I got well beyond that. What was the difference there? And the difference was life experience there. And so I believe in neuroplasticity, and I believe that, yes, the connections can be changed and so on. However, my football coach when I was a kid said something that stuck with me: do it right, do it light, do it wrong, do it long. And so I have hope for myself that I can reach near native fluency in Thai, even though I made mistakes in the past. However, I know it will take much more investment, not in doing things intentionally, but in investing in the language and culture and being there to get those experiences and to be open to changing toward those experiences. So what I'm saying is I started with the structural approach. I got to near native. I'm not perfect in Chinese, but I'm much better than you would expect for the structural approach. But I married a Chinese woman. I worked at a Chinese company. Everything was completely in Chinese for many years of my life. Right? That's an insane investment compared to ALG. That's an insane investment. And so Sean says, why do I not see foreigners living in England stuck on 70% comprehensibility? 70% comprehensibility. And David, I'm going to give you a second to discuss this.
I think they're all around.
Right. What I want to say first, David, if you would just give me a second, is that okay. I think it's because they are living their lives in English. The people who get to a high level, right? There's two things going on. One, people who are getting to a high level, they're living their lives in the language for many years. And then the second thing is you're not with them all the time. It's very easy to fool somebody into thinking you're at a high level in a language if you only have 5 minutes with somebody. David, I'm gonna let you roll with it. I just wanted to speak my piece at first, and now you do your thing.
I had a Puerto Rican neighbor, and I used to cut his grass, his lawn, and I could never understand his English from the time I started working for him till years later, after I'd grown up and met him again. I was friends with his kids, and his English never improved. It was always bad. Couldn't understand a word he was saying.
Right.
And that never improved. He lived in America. I knew him for at least 10 years. The same poor English he had. And I think there's a lot of people like that.
There are.
I think there's a lot of difference now. And for me, this comes all back probably. I don't know for a fact. But there's this thing, we always discount the life experience that we get.
Right.
But I think it's very, very difficult to find people who would be what I would call a pure language learner of English.
Yeah.
Because no matter where you are in the world, you're getting bombarded by certain amounts of English.
Right.
Without even knowing, everywhere, even in China.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where do you find a real pure English learner who could start at zero? I don't know that they exist. There's so much input in English these days. And I suppose there are some places it doesn't exist at all, and some communities. But yeah, I wouldn't be quick to say you don't find those people. You may not know them, but I think they're there for sure.
Here's my take on the structural thing. So we're actually talking about people who've had structural teaching, and then they get to a really high level in the language. And I think it goes back to many years of experiences in the language. So eventually they do basically do ALG, but it's forced through life experiences.
They don't know that's what they're doing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's only the people who go to the country and live entirely in that language. And a lot of people that go to the country, they're not living entirely in that language. They have a lot of friends and family with them that are still speaking the native language a lot. And those people, you can kind of tell there's accent, there's things they don't know. But the people, like when I went to China, I made it a point to have not just life experience, not one experience, my entire life. Chinese wife, Chinese boss, Chinese coworkers, Chinese friends, anyone who spoke English was like the plague. Get away from me. Whether they were white, yellow, black, brown, purple, green, whatever their skin color was. If you spoke English, you were not someone I was going to associate for these years. And I see It's possible, but absolutely, David, it's not common. It's not common, but it is possible. I don't want to say it's impossible.
Yeah, and I'm of the opinion it probably doesn't make any difference. All right. Um, at least not in some cultures. In the end, right? It isn't about how good is my Thai or your Thai or your Chinese or my Chinese. It's about
Right.
can you convey whatever you want to convey in a way that they can understand you and get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So for me, that's the key. And if they can, then you're successful in communicating in that language. That's the key. That's it.
Yeah.
Can you study a language structurally and communicate successfully through structural learning? Very, very difficult, maybe impossible. Bottom line, language doesn't come from books.
Right.
Language comes from experience of life. So if I asked you, how do you teach me what the smell of daffodils are? What does a daffodil smell like? Teach me. I don't know, so teach me.
Yeah. You have to
can't
experience
get it. You can't get it from a book. You can't get close to it from a book. Language is the same thing.
Right. And David, what you just said a moment ago brought this. It's a very important distinction. So you're talking about a foundation. Actually, when you're doing structural learning, the entire process of learning the language structurally is the foundation from the structural approach. Because if you don't then get life experience, you're going to forget it all and you have nothing. So like with my German, I did 4 years of structural stuff. I didn't get life experience. I didn't get the comprehensible input, and it's gone. It was nothing. So that's the foundation.
Let me ask you something about your German. All right, there's got to be something remaining from that.
Oh yeah, a little bit, sure.
So tell me a single word in German that you know what it means.
Ich. It means
Okay,
I, right?
It means I. All right. In fact, what you have learned is a new way to say I.
Yeah.
You haven't learned the German word for I.
Yeah, I got you.
You haven't.
Yeah, I understand.
You've learned a way to say what you already know in your own culture and language. That's
right.
It.
Yeah. Building
That's
on
what
the previous
structural
neural
teaches.
networks rather than. Yeah. No, I got you. I think I totally agree with you on this, and that it's the absolute easiest, fastest way to actually acquire the language is to actually acquire the language from day one with ALG. I do think it is possible to get life experience after the structural approach, but yes, you're fighting the neural networks you've created.
So,
it's difficult. It's not the right way to go. I agree on that 100%. I just don't want to say it's completely impossible. You know what I mean?
No, I think there's value to it even, but you can build the house from the roof down if you want.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Language study is fine. It's not vital to being able to speak it fluently. You don't have to study English grammar to be able to use English properly.
Yeah, 100% agreement on that.
You don't have to open a single book.
I just don't want to tell people who've already started the wrong way that there's no hope. You know what I mean? Like wherever you're at
is where you're at.
Is where you're
so
at.
So this idea of hope, I would just question, well, hope for what? What is it you hope for?
Hope to get beyond that 70% ceiling where you're maybe.
So all I tell you is don't worry about the ceiling. Just see if you can get out of this adult mode of trying to do it and learn from your life experience, and whatever you can do, you'll do.
Okay.
It's a moot point, unless you want to keep thinking and acting like the adult that you and I are, right?
Got it.
That's a challenge. Honestly, the biggest challenge of this whole thing is how do I turn off that adult part of me that says, I've got to be working at this.
Yeah, sure.
And I used a lot of logic and a lot of practice and maybe a bit of laziness to boot to say, I don't like to study language anyway, so that puts me in a really good position to try this program out because I don't want to study Thai.
Yeah. There was
Yeah.
intention.
So I
It's
was a
just
perfect
whatever.
student. I didn't want to do it anyway.
Yeah.
I
Very
was
counterintuitive.
motivated to learn.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, David. There's a very interesting question now. I think it's maybe, I'm not sure if it's as interesting or maybe more interesting, but it's very interesting in its own right. Would you recommend or discourage turning on the Thai subtitles while watching Thai contents? And I think there's a difference between, but I'm just going to let you have it. What do you think, David?
If the subtitles are in Thai and you want to get better at reading Thai, probably it's a benefit. Yeah.
What if you're learning like you still don't understand what they're saying and you're trying to use the subtitles to understand what they're saying?
The subtitles would be in English, translating English so I understand what's going on. No.
It's Thai subtitles. It's Thai subtitles, but I've learned to read before I've learned to listen, which a lot of people in Thai do, right?
Yeah. So I would try to not build on that at all anymore for now. I would try not to focus on reading. Here's the thing, all right? So this is a really interesting question because here's what I don't think happens. I don't think there's a point where all the stuff you learn, I like to think of it manually, all right?
Okay.
The structural learning that you've done. There's not a point where that becomes native. There's no crossover point.
Right.
You just get better at doing that. So I'd stop supporting it because it's not, it is what it is, but you don't have to keep building on that.
Right.
Okay. What you want to do is fill in any holes you have with life experience. Now, with reading and writing, it's difficult, but what did you learn to read and write?
What do you mean?
Well,
what do you mean?
Give me an example. For example, like if I learned to write, I've used this word mu several times, so we'll stay with that.
Okay.
If I learned to write mu in Thai, but in my mind I'm thinking pig, and I'm thinking moo, and I'm learning to write mu in Thai, but it's in my head, it's moo and maybe with an accent mark because I know there's a tone now.
Yeah.
I learned that too. So I've got moo with a tone and I'm thinking pig. It doesn't help me to keep supporting that whole structure. All right, that whole structure, I don't have to work at it to forget it. I don't know how to do that, but I don't have to keep. It's going to be there. You can't avoid it, but just let it be alone. Just don't keep building on that.
Don't feed it. Yeah.
Don't feed it. That would be what I think. But I don't. When Dr. Brown, he's the guy. Marvin Brown was the guy who put together this whole concept of ALG. He studied Chinese. He already knew Chinese, but he studied Chinese and realized he wasn't able to turn off that whole analysis of the language as he was learning it. Couldn't do it. He was envious of me because I did. I took about 3 months initially and finally found I was able to settle into this, just not worrying about it, not thinking about it. I stopped worrying about am I doing it right and wrong too, by the way. So all of these questions are taking me back to that. Like those were questions I had during my first 3 months of language study. And then after that, it's like I don't care anymore. I don't know. I don't care. You know, I became the perfect childlike idiot student who doesn't think about it. I just, no homework, no test. There's nothing to study for. This is perfect for me. And I would spend my time in the program and then go out and do other things. And for fun, I'd invite my friend over for barbecue because I knew every Friday night he had to study for his next test on Monday. So his weekend was tied up. Hey, come on over we're having this great barbecue Friday night, and he couldn't do it because he had to study,
Right.
So I would just do that to razzle him a bit.
So the answer to the subtitle question is if you're trying to use the subtitles to learn to learn vocabulary that you don't already know through natural listening, the answer is no. Turn them off.
Yes.
If you already understand what is being said and you're using the subtitles to learn to read, then great, right? That's the bottom line.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. And I don't try to learn to read things I don't know what they mean.
Okay.
So I've always been put off by that, even if it's in English. But if I don't know what the word means, I don't try to read it.
Yeah. David, I'm going to, we have another slide, right? And then there's a couple more interesting questions. I've got to get some water and use the restroom. I'm going to turn you loose on the slides if you don't mind.
That's fine. Let me know when you're back because I can't see you.
Okay.
But
so it's now you and the.
I'm going to go on this slide because you and I have talked about this already. I think, John, you're gone. So in ALG, if you think about this concept of levels, what's a level in our program? I've already said that at about 800 hours, that would compare something to like a 22-month-old child. In terms of hours, each level in ALG, let's say for the conversation point, each level is 200 hours. So 10 levels is going to be 2,000 hours. And this, if you look at the ovals on the left side, level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 through 7, and 8 through 10, that's total of 2,000 hours. Okay. So somewhere between level 4 and 5, you hit that 22-month-old point. And in that point is where speaking begins. So somewhere between the blue and the yellow levels is where speaking would actually start. And what I've tried to do in this slide is compare those levels to the life of a child from birth, or let's just say 1 year old, on up through 5 or 6 years old. Because what we're doing, unlike language schools or language programs, ALG really is working in those years where language is developing for a native speaker. We're not trying to work on learning the language in an academic sense. All right, we're trying to learn the language in the same way a child learns their language. So our comparison and our teacher, if you want, is the child, not this isn't something that we're going to go and say, well, the test is important and we know where we're at from testing. Why? Because you don't do that with the 3-year-old. You don't test their language unless there's a problem. You just leave them alone. They do fine. And so that's what we're doing from 1 to 5 years old. We don't worry about it. Then after that, you want to learn reading and writing. You want to study the language. You want to study grammar. You want to study particular types of vocabulary. You want to study the arts or the classics or whatever. On and on you can go as it relates to language. All of that's fine, but it's the foundation part where ALG focuses. And a lot of people don't get that because most language programs for us start beyond this point altogether. They start at like the 5-year-old or 6-year-old child at level on up. And all of our program is before that. So very little of what we do at ALG, now we do have a reading writing program, but very little of it focuses on anything after this point. Where if you compared it to other language programs, it would all be after this point. And so this is how I think about what we're doing with ALG is really is that foundation or that below the ground work and effort that has to be done. Okay. I am going to stop sharing the slide. Let me see, make sure I don't have anything else. We've done this one. Yeah, all right, this is all of them.
Hey, David, I am back,
Yeah.
and I was listening in on that a little bit
Okay.
as I was moving about. So would you go back to that slide?
This is it.
This is it. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So can you just summarize basically what?
Yeah, basically what we're doing in ALG is all that pre-study language development that kids get in normal life. And so when a lot of people would try to compare, and a lot of our conversations were comparing, what is ALG compared to, a structural approach. For me, structure belongs at the end after this. So you want to study grammar, fine, but get the foundation first. You want to study,
absolutely.
Specialize in this or that, that's all fine. But if you look at the first 400 hours, that's level 1 and level 2.
Yeah.
Right? That takes you up to nearly a 2-year-old. Right?
Nearly a 2-year-old. That's very humbling, right? Like a lot of people are like, that's part of the short-term thinking probably why people jump to the structural. Okay, I think I get the general gist of the slide, and I love this slide, David. I want to get to some of the questions because we've had some questions piling up here.
Can I take off the slides, or do we still want to look at them?
I'll put the slides back up if
we need them.
If we need them, yeah. So let's see here. Okay, quick question. So you can see me now, huh?
Not quite.
Oh,
I'm getting there.
So we've talked about all the slides already, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, yeah, we don't need the slides anymore.
We'll bring them up if we need them.
Yes, yeah. Which hopefully won't. Anyway, has David had debates with people regarding? I'm going to guess no, because I would have seen them on as videos if they were videos, right? Like, and also, I don't know. Yes or no?
So, debate in what sense?
Yeah.
Like, I don't argue with people about something. I'm not opposed to a good fight.
Yeah.
I don't have any problem believing what I believe. I don't have any problem letting other people believe what they believe.
Right.
For me, this isn't so much even about belief.
Yeah.
And what I found about ALG is from the start, it just made sense to me. For me, it was like common sense. Once I learned that apples take 7 years to have their first fruit, once I figured out that was sort of like natural processes, and then I learned, then people start talking at 22 months.
Yeah.
Right? And then I experienced school where I hated language classes of all of them. Spanish, English, Spanish, those were my worst subjects.
Right.
Okay. Then I came to Thailand, and what was my big fear? I don't know Thai. How am I going to do this? That was the thing that was, I don't think I was motivated to learn by fear, but I knew I didn't want to be illiterate too. I don't want to come here and not be able to get around verbally, right, or even reading and writing. All of that was important. So, for me, it was just common sense.
Yeah.
Now, is it common sense for most people? I don't think so.
Yeah.
But it's still common sense. I mean, if you it's uncommon common sense. If you think about the logic of it,
yeah,
what doesn't make sense to me and never has is, why do we even try to keep teaching anything, any subject, in a way where no more than 7 or 8% of the students are going to even succeed, even minimally
right,
succeed, which means that 93% or more fail. Why do we keep doing that thing? All right, that doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Now, what's the difference between ALG? Am I saying that more than 7% of our students do better? I don't think so.
Because they don't stick with it, or they're still doing
but
adult
the logic difference for me is this: ALG, it's not on the student. If you do what a kid does, you're going to get the results a kid gets. For me, that's the logic that's inescapable. You can't go now. You don't have to do what the kid does, and no one's going to police you. It's up to you. It's your life. It's your results.
Yeah.
But for me, do I argue that with people? No, I'm not afraid to say it.
Right.
I'm not going to fight you over it. It's like,
yeah.
So
right.
No, I haven't gone into a lot of debates. For me, debating with people, I've gone out on limbs on this with people. I used to have, part of my business was doing training for teachers in a couple of local colleges here, teachers of a elementary and high school English teachers, and so I did several training programs and things with them, and I made friends and enemies doing that. It was like some strong interactions in ways you could call it debate, I suppose. So I would say so, but not in a public format. Yeah.
Okay. So let's get it back up on here. I'm gonna summarize the whole idea, not just for David, but for anybody. The experiential evidence on this is just so crystal freaking clear that this is the way it works. However, the vast majority of people, even when exposed to this, will turn it down. Why? It goes back to that short-term thinking and seeing the short-term results. So this guy is sitting here, they can't speak after 500 hours, whereas the guy doing the textbooks, 500 hours, he looks like he's speeding along. So I think the vast majority...
I think there's more to it than that.
There always is, but I like to cut things to the core, and I think the core is that the vast majority of people, if you look at anything, are short-term thinkers. And the other thing is, there's two things that I believe are super big on this. One is short-term thinking. The other thing is social proof. So if a human being is going to look to see what they're, even without thinking about it, naturally we look to what other people are doing. And whatever is the common thing that's going on, that is what makes sense. So going back to David's point, we have these language programs in schools that are year after year, decade after decade, are proven to be completely worthless unless the student supplements with life experience. They supplement with comprehensible input through, say, watching YouTube or whatever, if they just do the textbooks, they're guaranteed to fail after all of that hours and effort. But we keep doing it. Why? There's this social proof. Like when I was a student learning German, the question, is this the correct way to learn German, never came up. The question never came up. And I was a smart guy, right? But that it's not about being intelligent. It's about that the way the brain works under the intelligence, where you see everybody doing the same thing. Oh, that's the right way. Oh, these people over here, they're doing it differently. That there's something wrong with them, right? So again, short-term thinking and social proof. I think that covers the vast majority of why you still see people knocking away at the structural approach.
It's definitely a different paradigm for people, but it's not when it comes to, if you look at how do kids in Australia learn Australian English? How do they do that? What are they doing that makes every kid in Australia learn to speak like an Australian? What are they doing?
They're living in the language. They're getting that comprehensible life experience, right?
So it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
That we can do the same thing. So the next question becomes, well, why is it that people move to Thailand after 20 years and still can't speak Thai? All right. So then you start to look at, well, what do they do that little kids don't do?
Yeah.
Right. And that's the real, the real place to be looking. It's sort of like looking at it from the exact opposite point of view, really. Not about structural or anything. It's about why don't people who are adults who move to a new place learn the language? And why is it that even young kids, when they move to a new place, also learn that language too? Right? All kinds of explanations about it. Like, well, adults have lost the child's magic. People believe that. They really do.
Yeah.
And they can't because of blah, blah, blah. And so for me, it's just, all right, well, maybe there's another way to see it. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what ALG is provided for, comprehensible is provided for. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about that, but it goes down to if you experience something, and you've seen other people experience, and then you're going to talk to somebody who it has a completely backwards view on it. What's the point in arguing with them, right? It actually kind of like, the word isn't coming to mind, but it lowers actually what you're, you know what I mean? Like it can't.
Well,
help.
yes and no, but I was just thinking of this from the other point of view as well. I don't think anyone who's studied language structurally or believes in that as the way to do it would care to have a debate with me. Because having never studied structurally, and I can demonstrate that my Thai is pretty good.
Yeah.
I don't think that would leave them with much. I don't know what they would do with that. How do you argue that point?
Yeah.
Because I didn't have structural learning, and my Thai is probably better than theirs. Not necessarily.
You can't argue that it's not possible, but what you could argue is that the structural approach is possible, and then you would get into, so you know what I mean? Like there's things that you could debate, but you definitely cannot debate that this works.
Well, I haven't met anyone who would say to me that structural has better product either.
Yeah.
They wouldn't want to go into that debate with me.
You would, yeah, and I see that.
They wouldn't want to. I mean, it'd be very risky because my Thai is probably better than theirs.
Yeah, I see that, and you know what? But if you were just on Facebook trying to learn how to learn Thai, and you go to that group, that Facebook group, Farang can learn Thai. The only thing you would come away with is if you don't learn reading first, there's no way you can learn Thai. That seems to be like everybody believes that, even the people that have like are supposedly the high level people in that group. That's what they're pushing is you learn to read first. That's the only way you do it, because otherwise, how can you know the tones? How can you know the sounds and blah, blah, blah. So, so I think that's where this is coming from. Like, but anyway, let's move on to the other questions. Do you have anything else to add to that? Yeah, I think.
No, that's fine.
Okay. This is something David's touched on already, but let's get back to it, because active and passive listening. So David, just go for it.
So I think the danger of passive listening is tuning it out. When I think active listening, to me, what that means is being involved in, really involved, really
engaged.
Yeah, engagement's the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Really engaged in what's happening. And so for me, all of that comes to engagement.
Yeah.
If you're engaged, then you're coming away with something that's memorable.
Right.
Yeah. And so if you look at when I was talking about the idea of monitoring the environment, right? You've got with a tree, it's soil, light, water, and temperature. With language, it's understanding hours of input, feeling, and then what was the other one?
Culture or something, or
no, but anyway,
that's
not thinking off the top of my head.
The hours,
hours, understanding.
Okay.
I'm gonna cheat
and look back at it.
Yeah, look at it right here. It's I can't see it. Hours, understanding, feeling, and then the native language. Yeah, culture you had.
Yeah.
So if I think of active listening in that context, I come away with engagement. That sort of puts together hours and understanding together, right? There's a word that comes up always in this conversation about interest.
Yeah.
I always felt if students were either crying or laughing coming out of a class, that was a great class.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter to me which they were doing. They could be mad. That was good. If it can create some emotion, it was the teachers were doing their job. Make them angry, I don't care.
Yeah.
Just create some emotion there.
Yeah. Like the video on your channel, the old one with Peter feeding him dog jerky.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. So I'm gonna say I'm gonna try to summarize here, and David, you let me know if I got it. The degree to which passive listening is going to be helpful or not helpful is engagement. So if you're washing the dishes and you're listening to a podcast and you're able to listen to enough of the podcast where you're engaging with it, you know what they're saying most of the time, and you're interested, then yeah, that's valuable. If you're doing work where you have to have 100% focus and you're actively tuning out the Thai and there's zero engagement, that might actually hurt, right? Is that basically the point?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I've got a slide I want us to look at again.
Okay, sure.
All right, now I'm presenting again, so I've got to come back. I can't do that at the same time. All right, here comes the share.
Okay. Not yet. Wow, we're going on a real marathon here. 2.5 hours, still going strong.
No. All right, so
it's kind of small. Oh, okay, got it.
Here we go. So if we look at this again, on the right-hand side, you've got these these lines. There's a line with the 0 to 20% level 1.
Mm-hmm.
That's the amount of language that you understand in the whole. The whole is 100%. All that red is what you need to get visual input for, to get any meaning.
Yeah.
Put another way, you could close your ears and watch and get everything up to 80%. Put another way, that might be all you get. If your understanding of the language is at 0, then all you're going to get is what you see. So if I'm doing passive listening, I'm getting 0 because I don't know any language, right?
Right.
Now, the point of that is that if I'm doing passive listening and I'm a level 2 student, maximum understanding is what's going on 4 out of 10 words or 40%. That's not enough to stay interested in what's being said. I can't follow the story. All I can grab are some words.
Yeah.
Which I should not be doing. I should not try to catch words. You see that at the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Even at a level 3, my understanding of the language is going to be maximum around 60%.
Yeah.
Without that visual input, 60% is probably not enough to stay invested in that conversation. It's not enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I see your point there, David. I started with having a little bit of structural, not your traditional structural, but like Pimsleur and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So when I did start doing comprehensible input day 1 with passive listening, I was able to understand a little bit here and there, and I was grabbing words. So I get your point. Yeah, I felt that it's been useful, and I really, I don't even know if I could go back if I would change it. But right now, I definitely understand enough that, passive listening, I'm engaged enough with it that it's useful. But yeah, I see what you're saying. For a total beginner who
not a total beginner, if you already have enough ability in the language to listen without watching what's going on, to get an experience, then it's fine.
Yes, and I'm there already, but I wasn't in the beginning, so who knows? Was it good? Was it bad? Was it indifferent? We may never know without studies on it, right? And unfortunately, there's not any investment in studying this, right? You think that but everybody with a PhD, almost everybody with a PhD in language acquisition or language anything, I've talked to a lot of people and they said, oh, well, I took a graduate course on why that's not the way to do it. You know what I mean? Like, God, what is up with that? Why is there not more interest in this? It's killing me.
Vested interest.
Yes. Yeah. The language industrial complex. Okay. So, and that's not the subject of this. And we could go another 2 hours on that. So, Michel, sorry, I don't speak French, so don't kill me. Trying to calculate how many hours I've been listening. That would be 251 days times 2, 500 hours. And hope so, yeah. Learned entirely with Jonathan's channel.
All right, good. That's a good benchmark. So if I asked you how much if you were just to average your regular understanding of what's going on in listening to those channels, right? How much of that would you give it a percentage of what was happening? Not the language. I'm not asking you to measure how much language you understood, but how much did you understand what was happening? That would be a percentage. It would look something like 60% or 80%, or I always understood everything. Yeah. Can you put a percentage of understanding on all that?
So average of the video. Michelle, are you still there? Because this is from 15, 17 minutes ago. So if you're still there, bro, give us a percentage on what you think of the videos in general that you've understood in terms of the story, right? Not the language. Okay, and so Sean here in the middle of that said, Michelle, you're stuck on 70% comprehensibility after 500 hours. You doing well, matey. Not sure. Okay, and then Sean, sound check. I'm not sure about this one either. Sean, are you not able to hear us? So anyway, so if Michelle is not there anymore, that means that we have got to the end of the comments. David, before we, and my wife is over there sighing, like, when are you going to get to work?
Oh, it's about time to be done here.
Right, exactly. So, David, is there any final thoughts you'd like to wrap up with?
No, I think got into a lot more, kind of more than I thought we would, which is fine. Unlike you, for me, it's going into the night, so the longer this goes, the more free and available I am, which is very good.
David, I'm sorry. We have Michelle's back. Okay.
Okay, good.
And Sean asked a question that I think is worth getting to. Let's do right now. Set a cap for 3 hours, so we have 20 more minutes maximum. Right? Is that cool with you?
That's fine.
Okay. So Michelle said, I get about 90%, 99% on the latest Crew Ying intermediate videos. So
Yeah.
That's now, but not before, but currently at the current point, most of the intermediate videos, and these are lower intermediate videos. They're like supposed to be level 1 intermediate.
Yeah. Yeah, I need a bit of a view broader than that. So we need to look at overall, what would you say, like an average understanding? But anyway, it isn't important that we do an assessment at the moment, right? The important thing is what I would recommend you do. Yeah, if you're at around 500 hours,
Yeah.
it's a bit too early to test it. All right, to see. If you haven't hit about 50% understanding of the language, about all you can do is go into a Thai environment, listen, and then say, I understand something less than half.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to put a number on it. But if you're looking at your understanding of those classes, it should be anywhere between 70 and 100% of those videos. Ying intermediate level videos should be 100% understandable for you, or nearly so.
Yeah.
That would be appropriate. And I would try something more universal, like if you were to turn on a Thai news broadcast. News is safe. It's always the same level. All right? And it's a good benchmarking tool. So if you turned on the news and watched it, not knowing the news already,
Right.
Thai news channel, turn that on. I'm guessing you would hit 30% and be average maybe 25 to 30% listening the news at the moment. Okay, and that's if you're not, I'd be surprised and interested to know what you feel like you understood.
Well, David, you said it's always at the same level, but actually I watched and listened to the news quite a bit. I feel like when they're talking about COVID or say U.S.-China relationship, with I get like 80, 90 for some moments, like more than 90%. But when they're talking about the monarchy and or Thai politics, it way south of 50 sometimes. You know what I mean? So it depends on the subject too, right?
That's because of you, though. That's not because of the language.
Right.
Those are your areas of understanding.
That's what I'm saying. But we're talking about how much I understand of it, right? That would vary.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, of course.
Yeah. And they use different words for the monarchy, though, right? Like when they're talking about there's one time where the guy with like the yellow golden kind of clothes, and he'll say a bunch of. I'm like, are they talking Thai or what language is that? You know what I mean?
Yes, no, it's true. That is true.
Okay, depends on the subject. All right, so Sean has a question. Sorry guys, Anyway, I'm stuck in a room for 7 days due to catching COVID. Well, Sean, I hope you get well soon.
Yes, sorry to hear that.
Yep.
And I think get some books. Stick with some online classes, videos, whatnot, and read some books. Yeah, I don't know. I don't do well stuck inside, but
so books. You're not talking about learning Thai from textbooks, obviously, but
good mystery novels.
Right. So if we're talking about using this time for learning Thai, what's your suggestions?
Well, I don't know your level, Sean. So if your level, it depends on your level.
I'd say intermediate. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot you can do. The farther along you are, the more there is available online to do. Yeah. And so, the less reason you would have to be in any course, because there's things available to you. I think something that would be a fun project and useful is find videos in Thai, index them as to how hard they are to understand for you, and then make that index, put it on our Facebook page or something so other people can see it. I think a future benefit for anyone learning Thai would be to actually index anything in Thai.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if we could create an index where maybe this is the beginning of it, Sean, you could start that thing off. We have a videos index.
Yeah.
This is real easy. This is real hard.
Actually, other people have yes, Simon has thought of this too, and we're trying to get something like that together, but it's that would be great. That would be great.
Yeah. That's what I recommend. Find as many videos you can and index them for us.
All right, Sean, that's your homework.
That's the homework.
Hopefully you can do that. That would be cool. All right, so we're at the end of the questions again, and I just want to say, David, thank you so much. Almost 3 hours, wealth of knowledge here. I definitely got a lot out of it. Sean, what's this? Okay, hold on. That's quite a good estimate on the news for me, I think. 25%.
Yep.
And then Michelle will send me 2.
Okay, perfect. You're where you should be. And more engaged listening would bring that up. All right, less passive listening, more engaged listening, or active, as you called it, I think will help you. In a nutshell, anything that you can take away that's an experience. So you could go home and say it in another language to someone, tell them what happened. That's what your brain holds on to. So if you cut open someone's head, you're not going to find language sitting in there somewhere. Language is a byproduct of the experiences your brain has collected.
Okay.
All right. That's the way to think about it, I think. And as your brain collects these experiences, language is one of the byproducts. There are others. And they join together to formulate a language. And that's why culture and language can't really be separated too. Actually, if you think about culture and language separately, you get lost because they're not separate things. They're the same thing.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
And a lot of people don't get that until you say it, and then they start to think about it and try to dissect it. It doesn't come apart, language and culture.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
And the reason is because it's all based in experience. So anything that's an experience in the language you're wanting to acquire, that's of value.
Got it.
And if it's not an experience, then it's less value.
Yeah, it's more of that intentional. I totally see that now. With the passive listening, for me, it was like at first, especially, it was like grabbing the language and intentional and so on. So yeah, I totally see that. At this point, though, I'm at a point where it is valuable as engagement and like experience or understanding. But yeah, as far as the past, definitely. So that's a good point to know. Also, another thing that you've helped me with today is the funnel. Going back to that funnel, I definitely have been feeling the itch lately. You know what I mean? Like, why can't I go faster? Why can't I do this? Why aren't I speaking? And why can't I speak better? I am speaking, but it's when I do, it's like that's not impressive. You know what I mean? Like it's not impressive at all. And when I don't want to listen to it after I speak it. So yeah.
You know about that. One mistake people make, it's a misunderstanding, is they think that if you learn Thai or some language with ALG or comprehensible input, then you're going to start speaking very well. And you're not. You're going to start speaking probably mostly people won't understand what you're saying.
Really?
You don't start speaking well as a result of ALG. No kid does.
Yeah, well, that's true. And
Right? And it's not physiological development that's keeping those things from happening. What you get that you don't have with a structural speaking.
Yeah.
All right. Is with ALG, you get this, I call it a MIF, MIF, or mental image class. You get this up here first, the sound, this word, this meaning is here.
Yeah.
When your mouth starts to try to produce what's up here, it doesn't ever come out right. Not at first.
Interesting.
So there's a period of time for where what comes out has to get aligned with what's in your head. The key is if what's in your head comes from Thai input,
yeah,
what is your mouth going to align to? It's going to align to the same thing.
Right, the input, yeah.
So if that image in my head comes from transliterated language.
Yeah, I get you now. Yeah.
If it's coming from all this input I've gotten from situation,
yeah,
then it's going to be like that.
Yeah.
And so what's up here? That's the key.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Sean says.
Saudi copy.
Okay. All right.
Hello to you too.
All right. So, yes.
I don't know if that means you're coming or going, Sean, but thank you for your questions, Sean.
Probably going. Okay. So Katrina is someone who is a true beginner. And she is saying, is there a way to tell if what's coming out is transliterated or forced versus just not aligned yet?
Well, yes. Do you have to pre-think it before you can say it? That's not a purely correct answer. But if you have to pre-think it, then just stop.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have to rehearse it in your head, if you can do it, like if you were a piano player, do you know if you're improvising or reading from the music?
Mm.
Do you know the difference? If you don't, then I wouldn't worry about it. But a lot of piano players aren't able to improvise.
Right.
And reading notes on a page doesn't mean you'll ever be able to. They are actually two different things.
Yes, different parts of the brain as well. Yeah, it's two totally different consciousness feelings. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if we think about normal, natural language use, we're talking about improvising almost entirely, unless and until you're giving a speech.
Yeah.
And when you're giving a speech, that's not improvising.
Yeah.
All right, good. Thank you for the question.
Yeah, great question. All right, so going back to me thanking David for the key takeaways, I need to settle down. I need to not worry so much. Go back to enjoy, or not go back to, but really focus more on letting go of catching the words and just enjoying the experiences in Thai. And now that my understanding is better, I feel that. Like, so watching the Thai shows, I can see myself not trying to catch words, but just enjoy what's going on and let things happen. So yeah, that's good. Not worry too much about, okay, I'm not speaking as well as I want to yet. And definitely what you said about kids' ages and, like, you know what I mean? And all kids begin to speak eventually and they're eventually fluent or whatever. Now, some people are more eloquent than other people, right? But everybody is fluent in their native language.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you're eloquent in English, you'll be eloquent in Thai and Chinese too. Don't worry about it.
Right. And if you're not, sorry, buddy.
Don't worry about that too.
Right, for sure. There's something in the structure there that in the brain or whatever, like there's, you know, you've got a little extra juice. Your engine is a little bit better. Yeah. Well, thank you, David. And,
you are welcome. Thank you too.
And I guess, wow, coming up on 3 hours. I'll say sawadee krap.
We can do this again.
We can.
Yeah, there's not a need to cut it off. I would be happy to. Are the people who are here mostly part of the Facebook page?
There's people from that. There's people from the channel, and then there's people from like the study, the informal study.
Anyway, they can. Yeah. So just send in continued questions, right? And Jonathan, you can funnel them on towards me or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
That's all good.
And I think it would be great to do another live stream with you, of course. However, I promised my wife that I'm going to take at least a couple months, maybe 2 months off from live streaming, because I've been doing a lot of live streams, and and she's starting a nursing program soon. So I need to help her kind of get into the swing of things. I'm going to be taking care of a lot of the things around our home that I previously wasn't. So maybe sometime in the spring next year.
That'd be good.
All right, David.
Okay.
Thank you so much,
good.
sir.
Well, thank you. Take care. Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.